They told her that once she met the benevolent Empress, she would be qualified to serve His Majesty in the imperial bedchamber at night. With fake smiles plastered on their faces, they insisted that her beauty would surely outshine everyone else. She merely turned and said, "Let's go." She sat there looking elegant and dignified, but inside she was already screaming, "Outshine everyone? I'll be lucky if I survive in one piece." The classic breakdown scene after transmigrating into a book had arrived. If she had known reading a novel would land her in this situation, she would rather have chosen to die from overwork. She thought of that book that had ruined her life, The Tale of Ling Long, which told the story of the female lead disguising herself as a man, reuniting with the emperor and rekindling their old romance. But this was no fairy tale at all. The Empress might once have favored the female lead, but people in the shadows framed her for groundless crimes. The Emperor's coldness, the constant bullying by servants, and the tragic destruction of her family all crushed her. Her heart turned cold. That once bright woman became a ruthless and calculating schemer. She fought with every woman in the palace with all her strength, and in the end, she won. But her victory was utterly hollow, and the price was losing the one thing she truly wanted, the Emperor's love. Then tragedy descended once more. While inspecting the provinces, the emperor contracted a plague and died. Once the emperor was dead, the female lead helped her own son ascend the throne and became the Empress Dowager, holding power over the whole realm. But Our Lady thought, what does any of this have to do with me? Why, you ask? Because she was only a cannon fodder character, a villain who was erased in the first few chapters and barely mentioned at all. Reality slammed into her, and she began to cry. I'm not going to pay respects to the Empress. I'm heading straight toward my cannon fodder fate. Most transmigrators had golden fingers, but she had only received a cursed, short-lived body. Her father was a minor official in some remote place, which meant she had no status, no money, and everyone disliked her. And worst of all, she was beautiful. Not just beautiful, she also had a seductive figure, which was basically the same as painting a giant target on her back and waiting for every jealous concubine to shoot at it. Her only hope was to keep as low a profile as possible before the true female lead arrived. Her grand plan was befriend the female lead, help her when she needed it, then quietly muddle along until she became a widow and lived a peaceful, retired life. A flash of inspiration struck her mind. Only 12 years left, but her daydream was shattered by a panicked shout. "My lady, kneel!" It was the Emperor's procession. Just thinking about serving that dog emperor made her stomach churn. With no ability and no backing, was she doomed to kneel until she died? As the Emperor's palanquin approached, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground. He glanced down from his lofty seat, his expression cold and bored. But when his gaze landed on her, a hint of recognition swept across his face. He stared at the back of her head. It was her. The procession continued forward, but he could not erase her from his mind. This woman was indeed striking, even while kneeling. He thought to himself. He remembered how he had noticed her immediately during the selection. He looked at her for another moment, his finger thoughtfully brushing over his lips. Finally, he ordered, "Move out." After the Emperor's figure disappeared from sight, her maids were practically trembling with excitement. "His Majesty stared at you for quite a while, my lady. Great fortune must be coming your way." But our poor lady could not feel happy at all. She sighed, only hoping time would fast forward to the day the female lead entered the palace and monopolized all the attention. By then, the one controlling the situation would be her. With newly born determination, she went to greet the Empress. They stepped into Fengyi Hall, a snake pit in the truest sense. The seating was strictly divided by rank, and inconspicuous new concubines like them were all placed at the back. A concubine with sharply drawn eyes noticed them. The best seats were reserved for the old companions who had accompanied the Emperor along the way. She glimpsed an empty seat and guessed it probably belonged to the most favored and outstanding concubine. Her gaze swept through the hall as she began identifying the key figures. Concubine Ru, who excelled in music, the quiet concubine Shun, and noble lady and noble lady Shun. These concubines all looked so young and tender, she thought. But she knew their endings. Once Chu Linglong appeared, they would all vanish. Just like me, nothing but cannon fodder. How miserable. Just then, an inner attendant's voice rang through the hall. Her Majesty the Empress has arrived. The Empress slowly entered the hall, and her aura instantly silenced everyone present. All the concubines knelt in unison and performed an utterly standard salute. But as soon as the Empress told them to rise, a smug voice sliced through the silence in the hall. "Oh my, I'm late. It was consort you." She lightly blamed her tardiness on the Emperor, saying he had kept pestering her all morning. The Empress remained graceful and merely told her to sit. Without even giving a proper salute, Consort Yu plopped herself down in her seat. This drew icy looks from the other women. As expected of the most arrogant character in the whole book, Our Lady thought with her head lowered. Remembering the original plot, she could not help shivering. This woman was a monster. Even the female lead, Chu Linglong, had suffered greatly from her schemes and nearly lost her life. In her hands, Our Lady was simply a weak and helpless little bird. If even the powerful female lead had nearly failed to deal with her, then she had even more reason to keep herself humble. But Our Lady knew that no matter how cautious she was, trouble would still come knocking. As they walked back, her maid said worriedly, "My lady, you have seemed listless ever since returning from paying respects." "No need." She rolled her eyes inwardly and replied coldly in her heart, "Listless? I'm reinforcing my quail persona so I can survive." Her thoughts were interrupted by her maid's startled cry. "Ah, it's His Majesty's procession." Our Lady's expression collapsed again. She immediately knelt and respectfully wished His Majesty peace. The chief imperial eunuch beside the Emperor narrowed his eyes and said, "Oh, this is already the second time we have encountered Lady Shen." The eunuch leaned close to the Emperor as if whispering to him. He pointed out that she had just come from the Empress's palace, then reminded the Emperor that the newly entered concubines could now serve in the imperial bedchamber. The Emperor only gave a faint hum, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. But the eunuch was not done yet. With a crafty smile, he asked, "Does Your Majesty have anyone in mind for tonight?" The Emperor's gaze slowly shifted and landed directly on our terrified, kneeling female lead. Not good. This was very, very not good. Our poor female lead, trapped in the palace, let out a deep sigh. Unfortunately, one palace maid insisted on stabbing her in the heart, gossiping that Lady Li had already served in the imperial bedchamber last night, while Our Lady was still waiting for her own turn. But Lady Shen remained completely unmoved and only said there was no need to hurry. She thought that it was actually just as well if the Emperor was not obsessed with beauty. Maybe this was even a blessing. After all, with my current status, if I serve in the bedchamber too early, I'll become a target instead. But staying cooped up in her room all day was about to drive her mad too. She decided to go for a walk in the Imperial Garden. Her maid immediately said she would accompany her, but she simply instructed her to bring some fish food. They arrived at the Imperial Garden, but as expected, it was just as boring here, and feeding koi was not exactly exciting either. She only sighed, wondering when her 2 years in this golden cage would finally end. But wait, a wild emperor appeared. He watched her from afar, and a strange thought crossed his mind. Her lazy appearance, like a bird that did not want to move, reminded him of the Empress Dowager's pampered white cat, always lazily basking in the sun and unwilling to be disturbed. His attendants, however, had already completely panicked. "Oh dear, His Majesty finally has free time to stroll through the garden," he whispered, "and yet Lady Shen has occupied His Majesty's favorite pavilion." He asked whether they should go tell her to get lost, but the Emperor merely raised his hand. "No need." Just then, her palace maid came over carrying the imperial gift, and they immediately knelt to pay respects to His Majesty. Our Lady turned her eyes, widened them, and hurriedly knelt to salute as well. The Emperor curled his lips, thinking that everyone in the palace knew this was his favorite place. Other concubines would deliberately wait here for a chance encounter, but her genuinely shocked expression was rather interesting. He stood before her. His figure was full of oppressive presence. Our Lady's mind spun rapidly. Heaven knows what he's thinking, she thought as a trace of cold sweat appeared on her face. She began to panic, suspecting that he might think this was a cheap trick she had deliberately used to attract his attention. Honestly, the fact that she ran into him every time she went out did seem rather suspicious. The Sheba demon inside her awakened, furious beyond belief. Even if it was intentional, he still shouldn't make you kneel for this long. She roared, "Isn't this just an adult version of a kindergarten bully?" She complained that at this rate, the next step would be beheading, so she might as well just kill him and usurp the throne instead. But she quickly pulled her chaotic thoughts back. The emperor in the original book was famously temperamental, so it was better to play it safe. Her thoughts were interrupted by a burst of pain. Damn it, my legs are already numb after kneeling for only this long. She cried inwardly. And what was the emperor doing? He was actually leisurely feeding fish, leaving her to suffer on the cold stone ground. Absolutely outrageous. At last, he looked at her. Enough. It was merely a chance encounter, he said, then ordered her to rise. She tried to obey while thanking him for his grace, but her legs had completely stopped listening to her, numb as if pricked by needles. The emperor watched her struggle. Pain showed on her face, and she could only admit defeat. My legs are numb. I truly cannot stand. His attendant quickly confirmed her awkward situation, and her palace maid hurried to her side. She helped her up. Phew, finally. Our female lead leaned on her maid for support and caught her breath. The emperor rose, leaving behind one final, baffling order. Feed your fish properly. He tossed a box of fish food onto the table and turned to leave. They saluted and respectfully saw him off. The moment his back turned, Our Lady immediately collapsed and wailed, "Ah, my legs!" In the distance, the emperor looked back. Looking at her pitiful appearance, a faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared at the corner of his lips. This man was truly a menace. Welcome back, story lovers. Another chaotic palace intrigue story has begun. We're now in Zhaohua Palace, and things inside are about to get exciting. One of Our Lady's palace maids, Chunhua, was called over. The senior palace maid had no intention of being polite and barked, "Come here. Tell me clearly exactly what happened just now." The gossip machine outside had already started running. The palace maids whispered among themselves, unable to understand why their mistress had been punished to kneel when she had only been feeding fish. But the senior palace maid Qilu immediately said coldly that their mistress was simply useless. The ever-loyal Chunhua wanted to defend her. Qilu did not buy it at all. So what if she hears? She sneered, complaining that their lady was so poor she could not even give the kind of rewards other mistresses gave to servants. She continued viciously mocking their mistress's hopeless situation, while Chunhua said she was going to apply medicine to their lady and turned to leave. Qilu merely scoffed and cursed her for putting on an act. They did not know that Our Lady, Lady Shen, had heard every single word clearly. She knew Qilu was lazy and resentful, and she also knew Chunhua was her only true ally. Just then, gentle Chunhua came over to treat her injuries. Lady Shen answered softly. Our female lead sighed, thinking that this new body was truly too weak, though fortunately her quiet palace was well suited for recuperation. But as soon as she lifted her skirt, Chunhua saw her bruised knees and sucked in a terrified breath. Before she could react, Chunhua dropped another bombshell. The emperor had summoned her to his bedchamber tonight. Lady Shen was completely stunned. That guy punished her in the morning and wanted to sleep with her at night? Was there something seriously wrong with this emperor? She thought to herself. Chunhua was terribly anxious over the bruises on her knees, but Our Lady was surprisingly calm. She considered that if it was dark, perhaps he would not see those marks at all. She stood with cold determination and said, "No need. What must be faced must be faced." Night fell, and Our Lady was wrapped up like a human burrito and delivered to the emperor's bed. She had been waiting since sunset, and it was already 10 at night. She began to wonder whether this emperor was even coming. The wait was so boring it was painful, and she could not help letting out a huge yet adorable yawn. Suddenly, the chief imperial eunuch came to deliver a message. His Majesty is occupied with important matters and has ordered Lady Shen to be sent back to her own palace. By sent back, he meant 4 eunuchs literally lifted her up and carried her out, like carrying a rolled-up carpet. Our Lady, so humiliated she wished she could die, could only try to look on the bright side. Maybe he'll get hit by a carriage. Truly a peerless savage. Cruel reality descended right after. She was about to become the laughingstock of the entire harem. The first concubine in history to be returned halfway through imperial bedchamber service. Just like that, she was transported back to her deserted residence with no dignity whatsoever. Then she was left there for the night. The next morning, the palace maids found her still sound asleep, her whole body tangled in the quilt. Chilu scoffed, while Manhwa explained that she had been wrapped too tightly last night and needed to be rescued from her quilt prison. Chilu pretended to be concerned, but in her heart, she was convinced the emperor would completely forget their lady. So what if she had that pretty face? She secretly sneered. But loyal Manhwa would not accept that. She sternly reminded Chilu that no matter her rank, their lady was still their mistress. She declared that since the first imperial bedchamber service had been interrupted, according to the rules, both the emperor and the empress had to compensate their lady with generous gifts. Just you wait and see. A new day arrived in the palace, but the atmosphere was not clear at all. Our lady sat down for breakfast, only to find that the dishes on the table seemed a bit sparse. 2 fewer than yesterday, she noticed. A palace maid explained that the imperial kitchen had served others first, leaving only scraps for them. But just as she quietly picked at her food, a group of palace servants arrived. They announced that Her Majesty the Empress had bestowed gifts. The so-called gift were nothing more than 2 plain hairpins. The leading palace servant explained that by rights, after her first imperial bedchamber service, she should have personally gone to thank the Empress and pay respects. But the Empress was considerate of her fatigue and had specially exempted her. Our female lead obediently thanked the Empress for her consideration, but her mind was already racing. She knew all too well what this meant, not allowing her to pay respects and giving her only cheap gifts. This was a warning, the Empress clearly telling her to recognize her place. As she was pondering this silent threat, the maids who had delivered the hairpins were already discussing it outside. Lady Shen has no taste. One of them sneered, saying the reward was both outdated and worthless. Another palace maid tried to pull her away, saying she had already found them new assignments under the head matron. But her companion refused to move. "I'm staying," she said firmly, determined to continue following our female lead. The first palace maid could hardly believe it. "Don't be stupid. This Lady Shen is finished," she said sharply, insisting that the Empress's actions had clearly shown she had abandoned her. But the loyal palace maid still stood firm. "Our lady has always treated people kindly. I won't leave," she said. Her fair-weather friend then stormed off angrily. But the betrayals continued. Inside the hall, another palace maiden knelt before her. She explained that the head matron was short of people and wanted to transfer her over. "Although this servant now belongs to you, my lady, she was once this servant's teacher," the maid said, finding an excuse for switching sides. Our poor lady merely sighed and allowed it. "I know serving me is not easy. I don't blame you," she said with a bitter smile. The palace maid smiled smugly and thanked her for her understanding, then left. Our female lead had lost another ally. Meanwhile, in the emperor's study, the man himself was buried in state affairs. A eunuch walked up to the desk and asked, "Which lady's name tablet will your majesty turn over tonight?" A row of name tablets was placed before him, and the emperor's gaze locked onto one of them. "Shen Qing. Wasn't she sent back yesterday?" he said in a low voice, a trace of memory flashing through his eyes. The eunuchs were all stunned. The chief imperial eunuch confirmed, "Yes, she is precisely the first concubine ever sent back in the middle of the night." One attendant was deeply shocked. His Majesty actually still remembers her? He thought, with so many women in the palace, to be remembered even without completing imperial bedchamber service is unheard of. Could this mean there is still a second chance? Night enveloped the palace, and in the blink of an eye, the emperor had already appeared in her bedchamber, leisurely flipping through a book while she lay nervously on the bed. She could hardly believe this was real. He closed the book, his shadow falling over her. He leaned down close, his voice low. "Do you resent me?" She was so shocked she could not speak and hurriedly denied it, saying this lowly concubine would not dare. But he leaned even closer and pressed her. "Is it that you do not dare, or that you do not?" She quickly explained that she had only been worried His Majesty had grown disgusted with her, but being summoned tonight had made her understand. She tried hard to smooth things over. "Yesterday, your Majesty must have had important matters." He listened, then gave only one command that made her heart stop. "Get up and undress me." Our lady froze, suddenly and very clearly realizing that she was wearing almost nothing. He looked at her, the expression on his face unreadable. As she got up, her outer robe slipped down, revealing the delicate skin of her arms. Nervously, she reached out to undo his belt. Her fingers fumbled clumsily. The emperor's gaze burned as it followed every panicked and awkward movement she made. How can he be so calm? She panicked inwardly. Is he teasing me on purpose? But he only watched her struggle, a faint smile at the corner of his lips, finding her flustered appearance clumsy and adorable. At last, her trembling fingers loosened the knot. "Your Majesty, it is undone," she said softly. As his robe opened, it revealed a well-defined chest. He pulled her closer. "Come here," he murmured, his arm wrapping around her waist and drawing her into his embrace. Our Lady found herself caught with the Emperor in an extremely ambiguous position. In her heart, she admitted that this man might be a complete scumbag, but she could not deny that his body and face were absurdly outstanding. When she placed her hand on his sculpted chest, she panicked, completely unsure what she was supposed to do next. She moved slightly, the motion so tiny it was almost imperceptible. The Emperor's gaze instantly lowered, his expression unreadable. Suddenly, with a wild elegance, he yanked her down. Our girl was yanked off balance and let out a startled cry. His lips came down hard over hers, the kiss burning hot. After a moment of shock, she seemed to soften too. He held her tightly, their bodies pressed together, and laid her down on the bed. Who knew how much time passed before the moon hung high in the sky? After their night of passion, our girl lay beside the Emperor, using his bare chest as a pillow. She fought desperately against sleep, constantly reminding herself that the palace rules were strict, and without permission, she absolutely could not sleep on the imperial bed. Just then, the Emperor sat up and called out in a steady voice, "Servants, prepare a bath." The palace attendants moved as fast as lightning, and soon carried in a huge wooden tub filled with steaming hot water. He turned those burning eyes toward our heroine and ordered, "Serve me in the bath." Her brain crashed on the spot. The tiny chibi version of herself inside her heart was already screaming its soul out of its body. She carefully peeked over the edge of the tub, her cheeks bright red and full of hesitation. He stood there, so awkward he did not know what to do. Before she could figure out what to do, he suddenly tugged her and pulled her straight into the bath as well. She cried out in alarm, "Your Majesty!" Her whole body splashed into his arms. Ripples spread around them, and he pressed her tightly against himself, lowered his head, and kissed her lips again. Our poor girl had already been completely drained dry, her mind a total mess. Since when did normal people have this kind of stamina? She wailed inwardly, utterly exhausted in the bath. The night deepened, and the moon's shadows stretched long. She must have been so tired that she passed out, because when she woke again, she found herself back on the bed, still beside him. Her hand was resting on his chest, and she was instantly swallowed by panic. She stammered an apology, "Your Majesty, I didn't mean to. I didn't sleep all night, But he did not get angry. Instead, a gentle smile, almost teasing, appeared at the corner of his lips. "No one said you did it on purpose," he said calmly, then ordered, "Serve the meal at once." Palace attendants filed in, carrying dish after dish. Our girl stood awkwardly to the side, while the Emperor took his seat at the table. He leisurely took a sip of tea and motioned for her to sit as well. He said, "Eat more." The chief imperial eunuch watched from the side, his face practically full of gratification. She looked at the table of nourishing dishes, collapsing wildly inside. "My figure is already like this, and they still want me to keep taking supplements?" But she sighed in resignation and picked up the spoon. She scooped up a spoonful of soup and instantly froze. Papaya and white fungus. This was a dish specifically meant to enhance the bust. Seeing her realize it, the Emperor revealed a sly, cat-like smile, clearly amused by her shock. The way he looked at her was both gentle and predatory. She stared back at him in total confusion. What now? What happened now? He stood and once again pulled her into his arms. Her mind screamed in terror. He can't possibly want another round, right? No way, right? Is he some kind of monster? Our girl tried hard to act calm and told the Emperor that she was starving. But her inner monologue was already in complete chaos. She had cursed this man as a demon and only wanted to finish eating and run. So she simply played the part to the end and swept every bit of food on the table clean. She ate the plates so clean they could reflect light, while the Emperor watched her with interest in his eyes. After he had seen enough, the Emperor calmly ordered someone to send her back. She clutched her sleeves and finally escaped from his oppressive aura, the tension in her whole body slowly loosening. Our heroine let out a long breath, thinking she could finally rest. Her duty had been completed, and in her mind, she was officially off work for the day. But on the emperor's side, he instructed the attendants to prepare rewards. He even specifically ordered them to exchange those flashy but impractical gifts for practical silvertails, clearly aware that she came from a poor background. Then he added another order, telling the imperial kitchen to be more attentive from now on, saying that the way she ate looked as if she had never seen food before, which was truly improper. The attendants were all stunned, realizing that His Majesty truly did quite like Lady Shen. The chief imperial eunuch passed the emperor's special instructions down to the people below, requiring them to be thorough and to watch their words and actions. Even if this low-ranking lady had only served in the imperial bedchamber once, she could not be neglected. Early the next morning, a grand procession arrived before our girl's door, ready to deliver the emperor's favor. When she heard them announce His Majesty's rewards, she was so shocked she covered her mouth. The trays were uncovered one after another, and inside, everything was glittering gold. When someone asked her to inspect the rewards, her eyes widened. It was practically an entire chest filled to overflowing with pure, shining gold. Our girl was so happy she nearly fainted, completely captivated by the sight before her. Sparkling money. This was simply a dream come true. She could hardly believe that the emperor had been unexpectedly considerate and had really exchanged all the customary silks and jewels for solid money, specifically for her. But the gift procession was not finished yet. Another group arrived, this time bringing rewards from the Empress. They presented exquisite jewelry and snacks that looked delicious at first glance. Our girl smiled, thinking that the timing could not have been better. She noticed that this was much better than last time, when she had only received one hairpin, and she had generously given that hairpin to Manhwa. The entire morning was spent receiving gifts. Our poor heroine was already tired, but later she still had to go pay respects to the Empress. Her maid softly reminded her that if she did not eat the delicacies on the table soon, they would get cold. Our girl was worried about the rules, but the maid reassured her that this meal had been personally ordered by His Majesty. She instantly stiffened, realizing that she had probably left the Emperor with a very gluttonous impression. An image flashed through her mind of him watching her devour food like a storm sweeping away clouds. So he remembered everything clearly. Forget it. Thinking about it was useless. She started eating right away, taking a huge bite, looking unbelievably adorable. A brilliant idea suddenly struck her. This foodie persona was actually extremely effective, so she decided she had to maintain it properly. Meanwhile, the atmosphere over at Central Felicity Palace was not nearly so cheerful. A palace maid reported that our girl had received piles of rewards. That consort, a fiery, fox-like beauty, instantly exploded, furious that Lady Shen was actually the only new consort to receive the Emperor's favor. Her maid tried to soothe her, pointing out that after that night, our girl had not received any title or promotion. The consort sneered, believing those rewards were merely compensation for the humiliation from a few days ago. Her maid chimed in, contemptuously calling our girl a beautiful plaything of low birth. She mocked that even if Lady Shen gave birth to a child, it would not be her turn to raise it herself. Thinking of this, the consort's mood improved slightly. She smugly expressed her firm belief that the childless Empress would certainly favor a woman of humble origins. The maid then raised a mirror, saying it was a pity they would not see Lady Shen during the morning and evening greetings today. A venomous smile slowly appeared on the consort's face. She was clearly already scheming up some vicious plan, and her plot began at once. A palace maid knelt before another mistress, begging anxiously, "Your Majesty, you must help me." Here it came. Our girl was summoned to Fingy Hall, which was basically the dragon's pool and tiger's den itself. She saluted the Empress, and the Empress immediately told her to sit. The Empress began with a seemingly kind question, asking whether the Emperor's sudden favor that night had frightened her. Our heroine lowered her head and answered obediently. This concubine would not dare make presumptuous guesses. But the Empress was sizing her up, thinking that Lady Shen's weak, fragile appearance was exactly what attracted the Emperor's gaze. Oh, the passive-aggressive praise had begun. How wonderful to be able to please His Majesty, the Empress thought, though her gaze was as sharp as a blade. She told our girl that her rank was low, so she was easily bullied by servants, pretending to sympathize with how she had once been treated coldly. Then the Empress laid down rules in the name of making a promise. "Now that you have already served His Majesty, no one will dare treat you harshly again," she said with a dignified smile. Then the Empress laid down rules in the name of making a promise. Now that you have already served His Majesty, no one will dare treat you harshly again, she said with a dignified smile. But immediately after that, the condition came. It was difficult to keep the Emperor's favor, so she had better focus on serving His Majesty well and give birth as soon as possible. Our girl merely answered yes, but inside, her mind was already a pot of chaos. Urging pregnancy after the first night, she thought, Her Majesty the Empress is way too impatient. While she was still digesting this, the Empress suddenly remembered that she had forgotten to bestow rewards. With a wave of her hand, the Empress rewarded her with a tray of newly offered rouge, face powder, and jewelry. Our girl was stunned by this grace and immediately knelt low to thank her. The Empress waved a hand. It was only some cosmetics. Why go this far? And then the true Viper's threat arrived. If anything happens, come report directly to me. Our girl agreed, her heart probably pounding hard enough to burst through her chest. After setting the trap, the Empress dismissed her. I'm tired. You may withdraw. She finally waved her hand carelessly. After returning to the safety of Zhaohua Palace, our heroine's maid was still excited. Her Majesty the Empress values you greatly, mistress. Our girl gave a cold little scoff. Yes, her gaze gradually chilled. She values my belly even more. Memories from the novel surged back. That seemingly gentle and kind Empress could not bear children and was nearly mad with desire for an heir. Her schemes were terrifying. She would manipulate low-ranking concubines, just like she was trying to manipulate her. After they gave birth, the Empress would take the child as her own, then get rid of the birth mother. All that false concern was nothing but a deadly warning wrapped in a gorgeous shell. Our girl shuddered, realizing that if she did not know the plot, she probably would have stepped straight into the Empress's trap, and might even have trusted her with her life. But our heroine was not stupid. She knew what she had to do. Contraceptive pills were necessary, she thought, her expression gradually turning resolute. Of course, she could not swagger over to the Imperial Medical Bureau and ask for medicine to avoid pregnancy. That would immediately arouse suspicion. So she came up with a brilliant plan, disguised them as a beauty-preserving formula. She told her maid that she had recently read some medical books and wanted to personally brew a formula to nourish the complexion and improve her color. The loyal maid immediately agreed to fetch the medicinal ingredients. Our girl looked at her, fully aware that the road ahead was dangerous. Later, after the medicinal ingredients had been dried, the maid helped her process them. Our heroine secretly took action and made a tiny crimson pill. She held the pill up to the light, a faint smile appearing on her face. Her maid only thought she was becoming even more beautiful, completely unaware of the truth. She made a total of 5 pills. Though few in number, they were absolutely crucial. She knew very well that preventing pregnancy was a capital crime. Even her closest confidant could only know that these were beauty pills. She had to be careful. One by one, she hid the precious pills in a secret compartment. At the same time, the Empress received a report saying that Lady Shen had shut herself indoors and was studying the beauty formulas she had recommended. The Empress was very pleased, feeling that her plan was progressing perfectly. Excellent. Once she gives birth, Your Majesty's wish will be fulfilled, the maid said. The Empress sneered. She did not care that the birth mother came from a lowly background. As long as she could bear an imperial heir, that was enough. But the maid then brought up another issue. Consort Yu was now relying on the fact that she had a child and had practically monopolized the Emperor's time. The Emperor went to her every day, neglecting everyone else. The maid worried that with such overwhelming favor, Consort Yu would cause trouble again. But the Empress only smiled, her face carrying a chilling calm. Imperial heirs are naturally lovable, she said, ice lacing her voice. Very soon, Consort Yu's little tricks should come to an end. The scene shifted to a new day, back in our girl's palace. The maids were discussing that Consort Yu. They heard that after several consecutive nights of Imperial bedchamber service, she had become unbelievably arrogant, walking as if she were floating on clouds. Our heroine casually nibbled on a pastry, secretly admiring her. How did Consort Yu do it? After experiencing that monster-like stamina, she could still float when she walked? Too ruthless. Her maid interrupted her, reminding her that the Empress Dowager had finally had enough and ordered Consort Yu to fast and pray before the Buddha as punishment. She warned our girl that she had to be careful when paying respects today. But our heroine did not understand. Why would she target me? The maid sighed and said that Consort Yu, humiliated and full of anger, might vent her rage on a low-ranking concubine who looked easy to bully. A trace of worry crossed our girl's face, and she thought that did make sense. Welcome back to another chaotic daily chapter in the palace. It opened on a seemingly peaceful day in the imperial palace, with the Empress summoning the consorts and telling her sisters not to stand on ceremony. The other consorts took their seats one after another, but Our Lady Shen immediately sensed an unusual aura. And by unusual aura, that meant Consort Yu's icy stare, which was about to burn a hole through the side of her head. Our poor heroine was utterly baffled. She thought, why is Consort Yu locking onto me like a radar-guided battle chicken? This was a reasonable question. Her philosophy in life was simple. Clever women deal with men. Only fools waste time fighting women. Her plan was to greet everyone respectfully, then immediately charge for the exit before the drama began. She successfully slipped away just like that, but before she had gone far, a voice sliced through the air. Lady Shen, caught red-handed. It was Consort Yu. She looked far too pleased with herself, praising Lady Shen's beauty with a sickly sweet smile, then demanding that she display her skills on the spot. Our girl only said, I obey your majesty's command. But her eyes were screaming wildly, this is a trap. Inwardly, she had already started calculating her odds. If she called me out this openly, she probably won't kill me. So this is to humiliate me? Consort Yu led the way, and Lady Shen had no choice but to follow. Once inside, Lady Shen tried to turn the tables. She suggested demonstrating the technique on a palace maid, so the Empress could watch and the palace attendants could also learn. A clever move, attempting to steer herself away from the center of the fire. Consort Yu seemed to agree and asked her to state what she needed. The palace attendants brought the items over, and one of them was even glad she had prepared in advance for this deliberate troublemaking. But just as Lady Shen reached out to touch that palace maid, Consort Yu suddenly spoke. Wait, she said she could not see clearly with the girl standing, then added the fatal blow with a nasty little smile. Do it kneeling. A new day, a new level of pettiness. Our girl was forced to kneel. This was the ultimate show of dominance from the queen bee of the palace. Lady Shen sneered inwardly. It was still the same old bullying tactic, but aloud, she only said, yes, playing the obedient little concubine. Consort Yu almost hummed in satisfaction. How well behaved. The palace attendants reported that everything was ready, so Lady Shen knelt on the hard floor and began working. Consort Yu soon found it boring, thinking that she had wanted to dampen Lady Shen's spirit, but with her being so obedient, it was truly no fun. But then she touched her own skin, and a trace of shock flashed across her face. It actually worked. Though unwilling to admit it, she was also moved. So she dismissed Lady Shen and immediately ordered her own maid to use this beauty method accordingly. Our girl finally returned to her own bedchamber, utterly exhausted. Her personal maid was startled to see her return so late. Lady Shen merely explained that Consort Yu had kept her there. Her whole body looked drained by the ordeal. The maid noticed the red marks rubbed onto her knees from kneeling for too long and was furious. How domineering. But Lady Shen merely stretched, trying to shake the matter off. She knew very well who she was facing. Consort Yu was the emperor's favored consort, had a capable imperial heir, and had a powerful maternal family backing her up. At least for now, survival was the only strategy. She suppressed her emotions, knowing that she was fighting a long war. An opponent of this level was indeed a huge threat, but our girl realized one key point. She did not actually need to act personally. Why? Because this was a book, and she knew the ending. Consort Yu was destined to be crushed mercilessly by the novel's heroine later on. So why should I waste energy on her? Our girl could simply sit back and wait to watch the fireworks. Elsewhere, the emperor was staying up late at the imperial desk reviewing memorials. An attendant cautiously asked him whether he would choose a name tablet tonight, also mentioning that he had been handling government affairs nonstop for days. The emperor raised his head, his expression unreadable. Here it came. An attendant held up the tray of name tablets before the emperor and asked that old question. Your Majesty, which lady will you summon to serve in the bedchamber tonight? The emperor lowered his eyes, storms surging beneath them. He thought of how after he had gone to Consort Yu's place, the Empress Dowager had punished her, forcing her to copy scriptures, clearly using the chance to apply pressure. She obviously wanted to push him toward the Empress. Ordinarily, he would ignore these unsubtle hints from his mother, but he pressed his brow, his expression icy, thinking that Consort Yu's temper lately did indeed need restraining. Ruthless. The poor attendants were practically breaking out in cold sweat, only praying that he would hurry and choose someone so the Empress Dowager would not blame them. His gaze then landed on one name tablet, Shun Qing. The decision was made. Set out for Zhaohua Palace, he instructed, picking up her tablet. And just like that, the emperor appeared before her door, scaring our girl completely stiff. Her poor little maid had already completely panicked and stammered, "Mistress." After the emperor was announced, his gaze deepened, and he strode into the hall, only to find our heroine holding an extremely flexible yoga pose. Her whole body was spread out on the floor, wearing clothing that could basically be considered the ancient version of underwear. When she saw him, her eyes instantly widened with pure, undisguised terror. He stopped in his tracks and lowered his eyes to look at this chaotic scene, his expression hard to read. "What are you doing?" he asked in a low voice. She hurriedly scrambled up and sat properly, desperately trying to look a little dignified. "Why has your majesty come?" she asked. He merely raised one perfect brow. "Am I not allowed to come?" Our girl's face flushed bright red, and she thought that was true. Was there anywhere the emperor could not go? The shameful reality slammed into her. He actually caught me in the middle of sweating like crazy and passionately doing yoga. He walked straight over, took her hand, and pulled her up. The air was filled with tense ambiguity as the two stared at each other. Only when her little white cat poked its head out from behind the curtain was the moment broken. The emperor's gaze was sharp, never leaving her face. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice dangerously steady. She quickly tried to salvage the situation, stammering that she was merely too delighted by His Majesty's arrival and had lost her composure for a moment. She gave him a perfect, obedient smile, doing everything she could to make the lie hold together. He did not believe her at all. Instead, he leaned even closer, a sly smile hovering at his lips. "Did you miss me?" he asked in a low voice, his warm breath brushing past her ear. Her entire body instantly went stiff. She looked utterly flustered, but that allure was truly impossible to deny. "Of course," she answered softly, continuing to play the deeply affectionate concubine. "I was thinking of your majesty." But before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by a shocked little gasp, because his hand had silently slid downward and given her backside a firm, possessive squeeze. He leaned close to her ear again, his voice lowered into a hoarse whisper. "That pose just now, if it were for me, could you still do it?" After he said it, a mischievous gleam flashed in his eyes. Our female lead's brain completely crashed. This man was far too bold. The emperor bent closer, held her hand, and asked in a low voice, "Can you still do it?" She met his burning gaze, a blush climbing all the way up her neck, and in the end she only breathed one word: "Yes." He curled his lips into a smile, desire flickering through his eyes as he pulled her even closer. The situation quickly spiraled out of control, and not long after, she let out a soft sigh. Clothes lay scattered all over the floor. She called softly, "Your Majesty," but he cut her off coldly. "Do not call me that." So, with a nearly reckless bit of courage, she suggested that perhaps your Majesty ought to silence her mouth. And to her surprise, he actually did. The emperor looked down at her from above, his expression thoughtful, almost like a predator considering its prey. Our poor female lead immediately panicked. He was not really considering it, was he? Her mind screamed wildly, impossible. All she had wanted was to get off work early and sleep. But he did not let her go. Instead, he silenced her protests with a deep, invasive kiss. The next morning, our female lead had already been drained until she was exhausted, yet she still forced herself to put on a brave face. She took the initiative to help the already fully dressed emperor straighten his robes, holding up his garment with a playful smile. She was just about to speak when he bent closer, his voice sinking a little. "If you still have strength, perhaps we could." "No." She immediately burrowed under the covers and shouted that she was already worn out, respectfully seeing His Majesty off. He merely laughed softly, silently making a note to send his little kitten some snacks later. A while later, our female lead lay comfortably in bed, being waited on, calling for her maid Chunhwa. "Come massage my shoulders." As the maid kneaded out the sore knots in her muscles, our female lead complained about the chaotic morning. The emperor had suddenly barged in and nearly scared her to death. Suddenly, a eunuch's voice announced that the imperial kitchen had delivered something. Chunhwa's eyes lit up. His Majesty must have sent Mistress something delicious again. The maid excitedly talked about how much the emperor doted on her. Our female lead took a bite of the food, and her eyes instantly widened. This was way too delicious. Her glutton persona was truly performing to perfection. But the peace did not last long. As she was sunning herself, a palace servant walked over. It was a messenger sent by the endlessly annoying consort Yu. The palace servant said the maids in her palace had failed to learn our female lead's techniques, so her ladyship had summoned her over again. Our female lead sighed. That woman just loved tormenting anyone she could torment. Her own maid watched from the side, her face full of worry. Mistress. But after they arrived, they were stopped at the door. Consort Yu's palace servant told them that her ladyship had suddenly grown tired and had already gone to rest. They were told to wait outside. Our female lead was not stupid. She could tell at a glance that this was a trap. This targeting was far too obvious. She could practically picture Consort Yu's smug face, waiting to watch her make a mistake and embarrass herself. It looked like today was going to be hard to endure. A palace servant announced that her ladyship had woken and invited Lady Shen inside. Our poor female lead walked in and performed a flawless greeting, but the woman seated above radiated pure jealousy from head to toe. Consort Yu glared at her, thinking that after tormenting her for so long, she had somehow become even more radiant, and viciously wishing that face belonged to her instead. Consort Yu immediately began mocking her, sneering that our female lead had only stood in the sun for a while and was already pitifully weak. Lady Shen forced out a smile and thanked her for her concern, while silently praying she would be allowed to leave. But Consort Yu was not done. She sneered that if Lady Shen could not even hold an ink stick steadily, how could she possibly serve His Majesty? And so, this petty tyrant ordered the palace servants to bring over an inkstone. Lady Shen was forced to practice grinding ink on the spot. Was this ever going to end? Our female lead's heart sank as she began doing this dull task. But Consort Yu immediately barked, "Not bad. Use more strength." The nitpicking that followed was simply endless. Her grip was wrong, and her hair had come loose too. It was an endless, exhausting session of fault-finding. All our female lead could do was answer quietly, "Understood." Meanwhile, Consort Yu watched from the side with a smug, satisfied smile. Even the nearby palace servant could no longer bear it, and tried gently to dissuade her. "Your ladyship, she is still a lady of the palace." Only then did Consort Yu finally end today's torment, though she coldly promised it would continue tomorrow. She waved her hand impatiently, and our female lead could only lower her head, bow, and accept her fate. As she and her maid left, despair gradually surged in her heart. She had only wanted to live quietly and peacefully, yet Consort Yu's endless harassment had become unbearable. A fire lit in her eyes. She clenched her fists and swore she would think of a way to make herself temporarily untouchable. But the moment she made up her mind, her body could no longer hold on. She pitched forward, and her maid cried out her name in panic. Then she collapsed. Our female lead fainted. The quick reacting maid immediately poured a heat relief decoction down her throat. "Are you all right?" she asked, helping our female lead up. Our female lead's face was pale and weak as she answered quietly, "I am fine." After they returned to the palace, the news quickly spread. A maid reported that Lady Shen had fainted before she even left. Consort Yu narrowed her eyes, full of suspicion. "Do you think she was pretending?" But the people beside her said it was unlikely. The maid gave her a dose of reality. She knew Consort Yu hated our female lead's beauty, but in the end, she was still just a frail woman of low rank. Then she delivered the final warning. If Lady Shen fainted in public next time, people outside would say Consort Yu mistreated the inner palace, and it would ruin her entire reputation. This threat finally worked. Consort Yu reluctantly canceled the next day's arrangements, and her maid gratefully accepted the order. In the background, another palace servant muttered softly that Consort Yu had indeed gone too far this time. But wait, the scene cuts back to our female lead, who had fainted just now. She is now leisurely applying a facial mask. Her maid was furious and asked whether pretending to faint was really necessary just to rest for one day, insisting that she should directly hook the emperor and have him punish Consort Yu. Lady Shen sighed and explained the cruel reality. Consort Yu had the emperor's favor for many years, as well as a powerful family backing her. What chance did she have? On the surface, she called this matter a trivial little nuisance, not worth taking to heart. But that was only her pretending to be calm. Inside, she had completely broken down. This transmigration had brought her nothing but humiliation, and she could not avoid it. If this continued, she might not even live long enough for the male lead to appear. A fierce new determination took hold of her. Right now, there was only one path left: stabilize the emperor's favor. She could no longer seduce him half-heartedly. It was time to go all in. An imperial eunuch arrived with a summons that might change everything. He announced, "His Majesty summons Lady Shen to attend him." Our female lead remained elegant and proper the whole time, only lowering her head slightly as she replied, "Understood." The scene shifts to the Emperor's bedchamber. There he is, as though a god had descended from the heavens, completely absorbed in a book. Our sly female lead peeks out from around the corner, watching him from afar. A mischievous glint flashed in her eyes as she thought, "Let me see what has him so engrossed." She quietly approached and finally saw more clearly, her curiosity fully hooked. She put on the appearance of a charming concubine and lightly touched her lips with her fingertips. "Please continue, Your Majesty," she said, her voice as soft as silk. "I will not disturb you." She covered her mouth, pretending to be innocent and naive, which nearly made him unable to resist. The Emperor's thoughts raced. He had just reached the climax of this chapter, and he thought that if he indulged this little enchantress now, the plot would be completely interrupted. He raised his hand, his expression unreadable. "Wait first." Our female lead obediently gave a soft reply from the side. "Yes." He began calling her name, his voice low and hoarse. "Shun, Shun-Qing." In the next instant, he suddenly pulled her into his arms and held her in a heart-stirring pose. The air seemed to burst with sparks. He looked down at her, and the world around them dissolved into a hazy blur of flowers. Bit by bit, he closed the distance between them until his lips were almost touching hers. "It seems you learn quickly," he said in a low voice, then kissed her. She let out a soft "ah," and he lifted her entire body off the ground, pulling her into a chaotic, burning kiss. This kiss was utterly soul-stealing. Our female lead, Lady Shen, was forced to exchange polite greetings with the so-called Lady Wang. The attending palace maids whispered among themselves, all shocked that Lady Wang, who usually stayed secluded, had suddenly come out for a walk. Suddenly, a sharp voice interrupted the discussion. "What are you two doing here?" The Emperor had arrived. Everyone froze in panic and immediately knelt to greet His Majesty. He ordered them to rise, not a trace of warmth in his voice. Lady Wang hurriedly explained that they had only happened to meet while admiring the flowers. The Emperor merely gave a low hum, barely paying attention to her, his focus already elsewhere. He could not help thinking that compared to the last time he saw her, she had become even more captivating. But our female lead was inwardly breaking down like crazy. She had finally enjoyed a few peaceful days, she thought, only to run into him here of all places. Slowly and hesitantly, she raised her eyes and met his gaze. The Emperor's stare was terribly heavy. It was as if it pinned her in place. Our female lead could not bear it and quickly looked away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, her eyelashes trembling lightly, completely unable to withstand that intense gaze. But in one extremely chaotic moment of misperception, Lady Wang saw the Emperor looking in that direction and thought to herself, "His Majesty is looking at me. Oh, you naive, confused little thing. That look was absolutely not meant for you." All right, let us jump straight into the drama. Our female lead and her maid were in the courtyard when the Emperor suddenly arrived. She hurried forward to bow, apologizing that she had not known His Majesty had come, then saying that she had already eaten. The Emperor responded coolly, "I know. I have eaten too." You could practically feel the tension in the room. Our poor female lead was frantic inside, and her maid was completely baffled, unable to understand why His Majesty always rejected Lady Shen's attempts to show affection. The Emperor simply stood there, his expression calm and unreadable. Finally, he spoke, but only to praise our female lead's clothes for looking pretty. She immediately grew annoyed, thinking, "TSK, after not seeing me for a month, all he can say is that he likes my dress?" But she still politely thanked him for the favor. Then his gaze landed on a stack of books, and he asked whether she was reading them. He pointed to a medical text, and she gently placed her hand on the book. She explained that her mother's health was worsening day by day, so she was studying medicine in the hope that she might be able to help one day. The Emperor seemed somewhat appreciative and said her filial devotion was commendable. But a tiny thought bubble exposed his true nature: success. Our female lead lowered her eyes and admitted that even after studying for so long, she still had not found a cure. The Emperor's gaze softened slightly, and he raised a hand to signal her closer. She obediently walked toward him, her heart pounding. He looked steadily at her and asked why she had been secretly looking at him earlier, yet was suddenly shy now. In an adorable chibi flashback, she was hiding behind a book and secretly peeking at him. She confessed that she was happy to see his majesty, but now feared she had somehow displeased him. He asked how. She lowered her head, her heart full of grievance. She admitted she did not know what she had done wrong, but he had not summoned her for an entire month. So clearly she had failed to serve him well. Bang! The light bulb in the Emperor's mind lit up. He realized he had neglected her for several weeks, and this poor little thing actually thought it was her fault. Thinking of how tempting her beauty and obedience were, he decided indulging her once in a while would not disturb the balance of the inner palace. He pulled her closer, his hand landing possessively on her waist, then bent down and said a rather brutal line beside her ear. Your previous performance still lacks study. You must improve. Our female lead's face instantly flushed bright red, so mortified she nearly died of embarrassment. Her heart panicked into a mess. Realizing that this delicate appearance of hers looked as if she lacked practice, she could only shyly admit, I have practiced in private. His gaze instantly ignited. Then demonstrate for me tonight, he ordered, his voice low like a restrained beast. He bent down, closing the distance between them, and asked with a wicked smile, how about it? That night at Zhaohua Palace, our female lead prepared to serve him, but he stopped her, saying she looked tired and should rest. This was a version of him she had never seen before. He thought that he had never seen such undisguised dependence and attachment. The way she looked at him was bright and delighted, as though he were her only support in the entire palace. Unlike the other concubines, she had no powerful family backing her. He felt it was only natural that she would rely on him completely like this. Just this once, he decided, a rare trace of softness crossing his face. To him, she did not seem like a concubine, but more like a spoiled child who needed him to look after her. Tonight, he was willing to indulge her. We see them sitting on the bed without touching, yet the wall of ice between them finally begins to melt. His attitude had softened completely, while our female lead merely looked at him, perhaps glimpsing a trace of the man beneath the crown. The Emperor personally watched our female lead change clothes, his gaze deep. He thought that someone so delicate should never have to do anything herself. Later, our sleepy female lead finally woke up. Her maid was overjoyed and immediately told her a major piece of news. They had been assigned a young eunuch. Qing was somewhat puzzled, thinking that by rights, her rank should not be entitled to such a palace servant. The new palace maid, Fang Yun, and a young eunuch were introduced together, and they bowed deeply to their new mistress. Our female lead casually told them to rise and not stand on ceremony. She secretly thought that both of them looked very capable, and that the Emperor really did know how to dote on someone. But when she looked out the window and saw the Emperor, cold reality surged back in her heart. His favor was fickle, and her only safety came from emotional detachment. As she drank tea, her maid brought her explosive gossip. It turned out that Consort Yu's pregnancy had come at absolutely perfect timing. Our female lead thought that a pregnant woman ought to be too busy to come looking for trouble with her, right? But her poor, loyal maid looked utterly heartbroken. She thought her mistress was forcing herself to stay calm, saddened because she herself could not become pregnant while her rival was with child. The kind girl tried to comfort her, promising that she would have her own child in the future too. Our female lead only smiled and said she was not in a hurry. But then a memory flashed through her mind, and her eyes sharpened in shock. Wait, in the original novel, Consort Yu clearly only gave birth to a pair of twins. A chilling thought swept through her heart. Could this pregnancy fail to reach full term? Her newly arrived palace servants were all full of gratitude because of her rewards. Later, our female lead walked through the garden of Fengyi Hall. She had originally thought she would face Consort Yu's routine harassment again today, but now Consort Yu was confined because of her pregnancy, and the road ahead was clear and peaceful. She smugly thought that without that fighting rooster around, even the air felt fresher. But her peace was soon shattered. She saw a group of concubines ahead, their gazes like knives. One of them in particular looked ready to start a war. Our female lead immediately decided that before this verbal conflict escalated, it would be better to retreat first. But it was already too late. A sharp voice called out to her. Lady Shen. 3 mean-spirited women blocked her path, all with mocking expressions on their faces. Realizing she could not avoid this, our female lead closed her eyes, sighed softly, and thought, here we go again. Welcome back, my drama-loving darlings, to another scorching hot plot commentary. The story begins in the beautiful peaceful yet perilous palace gardens, where the concubines of the inner palace have gathered together. One concubine lavishly praised our female lead, Shun Qing, sighing that her beauty truly had no equal. But do not be fooled by these sweet words, because inside, she was actually calculating how she could survive under the overbearing consort you. Our female lead had always understood palace social maneuvering well, so she cooperated by revealing a modest smile. "You flatter me, sister," she said, her entire person radiant. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, she calmly took her leave and returned to her own palace. As soon as she had gone far enough, the clause came out. She has not even been promoted yet, but she's already acting as though she stands on equal footing with us. One of them sneered. Another echoed with mockery, saying that she was putting on empty airs despite lacking sufficient family background, and that if she wanted to climb higher, she would probably need to get pregnant first. They then began flattering Lady Fong, believing that she came from the most noble background and would be promoted the fastest. Lady Fong herself merely curled her lips into a smile and told them not to make baseless guesses. After that, everyone left. Meanwhile, in the safe territory of her own bedchamber, our glutton queen was deeply studying cuisine. Suddenly, a eunuch's voice cut through the air, announcing the sudden arrival of an honored guest. "His Majesty has arrived." Shun Qing jolted, completely caught off guard. But the little chibi version of her heart knew exactly what this meant. The Emperor's arrival equaled the arrival of delicious food. She immediately put on her most charming smile to welcome him. The moment he opened his mouth, he asked whether she had eaten, a faint smile at his lips. He had already seen through what she cared about most, thinking her attention is always fixed on food. Could I really not compare to a single bite of a meal? The little voice inside her heart screamed the obvious answer, yes. He teased her for thinking about meals every day, asking whether the palace was starving her. She hurriedly tried to salvage the situation, saying that her simple food naturally could not compare to the imperial cuisine on His Majesty's side. But oh no, the truth had slipped out. She froze in terror. He leaned closer with great interest, because he discovered that although she was clearly greedy for food, he did not find it annoying at all. Our female lead's mind spun rapidly, and she immediately invented a romantic explanation. "Because only the first time I served Your Majesty did I ever dine together with you," she said in a soft voice. "That memory has always stayed in my heart." Everyone, he completely believed it. He bent closer and said in a low voice, "Tonight, I will fulfill that longing of yours." Then he ordered the palace servants to serve the meal. The banquet was laid out, and it was extremely lavish. Our female lead thought that this was the best meal she had eaten since entering the palace. But her joy instantly turned to ashes, because on the table she saw her sworn enemy, shredded carrots. She stared at that offensive dish, her face full of disgust. The little angel and little devil in her heart began to argue. The angel whispered, "Hurry up and eat. You have to put on an act for the Emperor's favor." But the devil immediately retorted, "Act for what? You did not even eat your fill last time." Lady Shen took a deep breath. She knew today was different. In her mind flashed her observations from these past days. All the other concubines were gentle and charming, obeying the Emperor in everything. She remembered that what had first made him notice her was not just her beauty, but that tiny bit of disobedience. It was precisely that rebellious streak that made him remember her and even assign more palace maids to her. Inspiration suddenly struck her. Clearly, Xin Yuanling did not like people who were too obedient. Now was the perfect time to solidify her image as a little rebel. Just then, the Emperor asked, "Why are you not eating?" The show began. She lightly touched her lips, revealed a trace of distaste, and said, "I do not like this." Then she gently nudged it with her chopsticks, pushing the plate of carrots farther away. Next, she said, "I will eat this," and picked up a completely different dish. The Emperor looked at her, and a smile slowly rose at the corner of his lips. How novel, he thought, but he was not ready to end the test yet. He deliberately picked up a terrifying piece of carrot and placed it in her bowl. Her little chibi form instantly panicked. "Your Majesty," her voice trembled slightly, "I do not like this." His gaze darkened. "But I am the Emperor. Do you dare refuse what I bestow upon you? The pressure instantly hit its peak. With tears in her eyes, she picked up the carrot, her voice so low it was almost inaudible. Then I will eat it. Seeing her pitiful yet adorable reaction, the Emperor's heart softened at once. He had only meant to tease her in the first place, and he stopped her in time. I was only teasing you today, he said gently. Then he replaced the carrot in her bowl with a piece of eggplant. She thanked him, and her little chibi form let out a long sigh of relief. With a gentle smile, he said to her, "Eat. From now on, eat whatever you like. If you do not like something, then do not eat it. Missing one bite will not hurt." After a wonderful meal, our girl ate to her heart's content. Later, she served him tea and explained that the weather had grown hot, so she had changed to a lighter fragrance. The Emperor was quite satisfied and said, "Not bad," then agreed to have the Imperial Household Department send her ice. She thanked him softly and gratefully, but this night was far from over. He leaned closer to her, lowering his voice into an intimate murmur. "Since I granted you a wish, should you not repay me as well?" "No matter," he chuckled softly, his gaze locking onto her eyes. "I will bathe with you." The Emperor swept our girl into his arms and carried her into Zhaohua Palace. She said softly that her clothes were still wet from the rain. "No matter," he said. They entered the bedchamber. Blushing, she called to him shyly. Later, the two lay down on the bed, and she was already unbearably hot. The weather was hot to begin with, but this man was practically a furnace. Happily, she kicked out her leg and sent the quilt flying. The Emperor's face instantly darkened into the expression of a puffed-up little chibi. "Lady Shen, are you rejecting me?" he said unhappily. Our girl adorably puffed out her cheeks. "How could I? I'm simply too hot." She tried to inch away from his scorching body heat, her face already completely red. He could also tell that she truly could not bear it. The Emperor sighed helplessly. She exaggeratedly rolled all the way to the other side of the bed. "Come back," he ordered. She turned around and pouted. "But Your Majesty, I am hot." He explained that the heat just now was only lingering for what had happened earlier. "It has already faded now," he said. He took her hand. "Feel for yourself." And as it turned out, he really was cooler now. Our girl was stunned. He told her to sleep, and also said he had not forgotten the ice he owed her. He pulled her into his arms, and she sweetly thanked him. But a sly smile flickered across his lips. Sending ice, he thought, was not only for her comfort. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, hidden currents were already stirring. A palace maid hurried to her mistress with bad news. His Majesty had stayed with that Shen woman again last night. The rival concubine, Lady Wang, trembled with rage, venting her fury on the maid without the slightest concealment. "Useless servant, it took you this long just to gather some news?" The maid timidly explained that Zhaohua Palace was far away. Lady Wang did not listen at all and reached out to grab her by the collar. To save herself, the maid had a sudden idea. "Mistress," she whispered, "I have a way to make Shen suffer a little." Lady Wang's eyes lit up. "Oh!" The maid leaned closer and suggested adding something special to Shen's meals. After all, she would never dare suspect the Imperial kitchen. A sinister, calculating smile slowly rose on Lady Wang's face. "She deserves it," Lady Wang sneered. "Go do it." The next day, our poor heroine was admiring the newly delivered lip rouge. She took one bite of rice and immediately retched. "What is wrong?" her palace maid asked worriedly. Our girl covered her mouth, trying hard to suppress the churning nausea. "It is nothing," she gasped. "Pour me some water." The maid hurried out, but when she returned, she found our girl bent over and vomiting. A shocking thought suddenly flashed through the maid's mind. Could she be pregnant? Our girl nearly vomited up her lunch, and the maid was so frightened that she hurried to call an imperial physician. But Lady Shen immediately called her back. "Come back. I'm not pregnant. That soup is just absurdly salty." The maid froze, remembering the contraceptive medicine the heroine had been taking all along. But her other maid was furious, realizing that someone must have tampered with a meal from the Imperial kitchen. The first maid asked, "Should we report this to His Majesty?" But Lady Shen only gave her a cold look, having already pieced everything together in her mind. She said calmly, "It is not worth making a fuss over." Then she ordered the lunch sent back. She knew the Imperial kitchen would naturally understand. Meanwhile, at the Imperial kitchen, the head eunuch received the untouched meal and wondered if Lady Shen was deliberately finding fault. But his assistant was more cautious and suspected there was something wrong with the food itself. He tested the soup with a silver needle. It was not poison, but it was definitely not right. What should they do? Of course, taste it. The head eunuch scooped up a large spoonful and immediately immediately regretted every decision he had ever made in his life. He choked and coughed, spitting out the mouthful of pure salt, and instantly understood what had happened. The meal had clearly been fine when it was prepared. Someone had tampered with it on the way to delivery. If poison had truly been added, their entire imperial kitchen would have lost their heads. He barked an order, his voice ringing all around, commanding someone to summon the guards. Later, after the new lunch was delivered, someone returned to report that Lady Shen had accepted the new meal with a smile and had not mentioned the matter at all. The head eunuch then asked the most important question: "What did you find?" The investigation quickly had results. Lady Wang's palace may have been seen sneaking around near Lady Shen's meal delivery, then hurrying away. The head eunuch's face immediately turned terrifyingly dark. Through gritted teeth, he said, "If a mere lady wants to use the imperial kitchen as her blade, then she can forget about ever eating a decent meal again." His assistant worried that doing so would look bad, but the head eunuch had already thought 10 steps ahead. He understood that Lady Shen's quiet handling of the matter had actually done them a great favor. He decided to personally go apologize and acknowledge this debt. And so Eunuch Shang arrived with gifts of apology, his face full of humility and remorse. He blamed the mistake on his subordinate's incompetence and presented our girl with a box of exquisite pastries. Lady Shen remained dignified and proper, accepting his apology gently. Just as Eunuch Shang turned to leave, he heard Lady Shen's palace maid ask her why she did not try seeking refuge with the currently powerful consort Yu. Eunuch Shang's footsteps paused, and he hid behind a tree, preparing to eavesdrop on this fresh palace gossip. News traveled quickly. In another palace, concubine Ru was leisurely embroidering as the eunuch beside her reported that Lady Wang had already pledged loyalty to consort Yu. Concubine Ru did not even lift her eyelids and only said it was a trivial matter. A sly and dangerous smile rose at the corner of her lips. She knew consort Yu's reputation very well. That woman could not tolerate any rival. Concubine Ru sighed softly, almost as though pitying the foolish woman for personally sealing her own fate. The palace attendants beside her respectfully echoed her words. Our Empress looked at the scene before her and noticed that the 6-year-old crown prince did not resemble her husband at all. She lowered her head to look at a plate of sliced cucumbers, sank into thought, then slowly picked up a slice with her chopsticks. Opposite her, the Emperor took in her every move, a smile on his lips. As usual, he thought she was disdaining the food again. He poured himself a cup of golden wine, raised it high, and said, "A toast to my imperial son." Everyone raised their cups in succession and wished the crown prince a joyful birthday. But not everyone was celebrating. On the other side, the resentful Lady Wang lamented her poor fate. She had only wanted a little of the emperor's favor, yet now she had been punished. So she began to drown her sorrows in wine, sighing that the emperor was truly like an immortal. She poured down cup after cup. One cup was not enough, so she simply grabbed the whole jug and poured it down her throat. Her cheeks flushed bright red, her head spun, and she giggled to herself. "Your Majesty, I am so hot." Her thoughts gradually turned into a burning, desperate craving. "I want His Majesty." She collapsed drunk on the table, unconscious, while still murmuring the emperor's title like a prayer. After night deepened, her maid gently tried to wake her drunken mistress. "Mistress," she said, "the banquet has ended. Let's go back." As Lady Wang was being helped away, our Empress happened to see her, and the Empress noticed that her face was flushed, and the person standing in the shadows was none other than the Emperor himself. Lady Wang's palace maid hurriedly urged her to leave and reminded her that the Emperor was going to the Empress's palace tonight. To the drunk Lady Wang, those words were enough. A mad and possessive light flashed in her eyes, and she said, "I want him now." Our Empress stiffened, her eyes widening in disbelief. Now there was a show to watch. She immediately hid behind a tree, wondering whether she should leave, but this spectacle was far too exciting for her to bear missing it. She decided to hide more carefully, yet could not help wondering whether secretly watching this chaotic drama counted as a crime punishable by beheading. Just then, Lady Wang staggered forward, blocked the Emperor's path, and cried out his title. The Emperor's face twisted with utter disgust at her. Disgraceful behavior. The eunuch beside him trembled with rage, gritting his teeth as he thought, which idiot dares block the Empress's rightful night of service? But Lady Wong was already lost in her own world, letting out a long, seductive moan at His Majesty. The poor eunuch was so shocked that his face lost all color. That sound, he sucked in a breath. Has Lady Wong even thrown away her dignity? Before everyone could react, she had already lunged forward and wrapped her arms around the Emperor's back. The Emperor coldly ordered her to withdraw. All right, it was confirmed. The Emperor had been publicly molested in the middle of the Imperial Garden. Our girl was so shocked her jaw nearly dropped, her face filled with chaotic disbelief. Even a little crown prince looked utterly confused. The Emperor could bear it no longer and flung Lady Wong away hard. He sent her flying straight out. The eunuch shrieked for the guards, "Protect His Majesty." Our Empress poked her head out from her hiding place to watch. Lady Wong's palace attendants all knelt and begged for mercy, crying that she had merely drunk too much and had not meant it. The Emperor did not even look at them, coldly ordering that she be made to sober up properly. Then he turned and left, throwing the rotten mess behind him. The Empress watched him leave, a smile rising on her lips. She had never expected to witness such an absurd spectacle with her own eyes tonight. It was truly an unexpected delight. After returning to her bedchamber, she was preparing to welcome the Emperor's arrival, but a palace attendant entered with bad news. His Majesty would not be coming tonight. The Empress's face instantly darkened. Hearing that Lady Wong had stopped him, she angrily cursed, "Wretch." But the managing palace maid calmly explained that the real problem was not merely that she had blocked His Majesty. Blocking His Majesty was a small matter. The true scandal was Lady Wong's utterly disgraceful behavior. His Majesty is not only disgusted with her, the maid said. His Majesty is blaming me for failing to properly discipline the people under me. The Empress drew in a sharp breath, her anger cold and severe, her gaze turning to ice. Since Lady Wong does not understand the rules, she said, her voice dangerously low, then find someone to teach her what rules are. The scene shifted to Qinyuan Palace. Here, the tea was hot, and the gossip was even hotter. An attendant was reporting the morning's news to the Emperor. Concubine Ru had already reported another concubine's absurd behavior from last night to the Empress. And oh, the Empress was furious. It was not just that Lady Wong had done something so humiliating. The truly fatal part was that Lady Wong even had the nerve to complain, saying it was the Emperor's fault for not visiting her often. The Empress looked practically like a goddess of vengeance, with no intention of letting her off lightly. She stated bluntly that Lady Wong was not merely drunk, but clearly insane. She coldly ordered that the woman be taken away from her sight and sent to a quiet place to recover from her illness. Hiss. The attendant continued reporting that this was not Lady Wong's first offense. She had already been punished by Consort Yu after losing imperial favor. In other words, this chance encounter with the Emperor's procession had been completely engineered by someone. The Emperor's gaze was icy as he told the attendant he had done well and knew what should be investigated and what should not. It was a chilling warning. Then he calmly agreed to the Empress's handling of the matter. Expressionless, the Emperor admitted that he had probably displeased the Empress Dowager by not visiting her palace. To appease her, he ordered some nourishing supplements sent over, then swept his sleeves and left. The attendant bowed and accepted the order, promising to handle it immediately. Meanwhile, life over at Zhaohua Palace was much livelier. In just a few short days, the lively gossip about Lady Wong's scandal had completely vanished, leaving only the news that she was recovering from illness. Our girl, Lady Shen, watched her palace maid kick a shuttlecock, but her mind was turning rapidly. She knew Lady Wong had been drugged, but the key question was, who did it? She went through the suspects one by one. Before the incident, Lady Wong had only offended 3 people: Lady Shen herself, Concubine Ru, and Consort Yu. Consort Yu had already punished her and was now busy with her child, so that left the cunning Concubine Ru. Her maid sighed and said that her mistress had clearly been the one to suggest playing this. Yet now she herself had started spacing out. Lady Shen smiled, rose, and said, "I will do it." But look who was hidden among the shadows of the flowers. The Emperor himself had come and was watching her from afar. He thought to himself that he had been dealing with the drought for days, so how had he somehow walked here? Then he looked at her. Without him there, she seemed to be having quite a good time. Suddenly, he stepped forward and revealed himself. Everyone instantly froze, knelt, and called out, "Your Majesty." The Emperor's gaze was cold and deep, fixed firmly on our girl, Lady Shen. "What are you doing?" She did not panic at all. She bounced over and explained that she was only kicking a shuttlecock. She even proudly showed him the shuttlecock she had made herself, weighted inside with 3 small copper coins. The Emperor admitted it was cleverly made, but his tone turned cold again as he asked why she was so idle and playful whenever he did not come. She adorably pouted and begged him not to punish her this time. To divert his attention, she offered to show him her skill. He raised a brow. "What if I am not impressed?" "Then your Majesty may punish me," she boldly said. With his permission, she began kicking the shuttlecock. The Emperor could not help revealing the faintest smile, thinking how quickly her grievance from just now had vanished. She stopped and walked closer to him, holding the shuttlecock. "Your Majesty," she said. "As I was kicking it, I suddenly understood something." She leaned closer, her eyes sparkling. "It is not that you dislike me playing this. You are only worried that my clothes and appearance would become disheveled and undignified, so you deliberately scolded me." This girl could practically turn straw into gold with her words. The two were so close that the air seemed to crackle. She looked up at him, her voice as soft as a whisper. "Your Majesty, I accept my punishment." Bang! The Emperor completely short-circuited. He actually began to wonder whether her lips would be as sweet as her words. He had always thought kissing was a waste of time, so why at this moment did it feel as though he had been bewitched, enchanted by her, and longing to taste the flavor of her lips? She looked up at him, completely unaware of the storm she had stirred in his mind. But just as the atmosphere reached its peak, 2 other concubines appeared. They instantly shattered the moment. He coldly ordered Lady Shen to copy scriptures so she could calm that restless heart of hers. The newly arrived concubine softly asked our girl, "What do we do now?" But Lady Shen was as steady as a mountain. "It is fine," she said with a knowing expression. She thought to herself that the Emperor of the past would never have let his true emotions show. But now, this Emperor practically had the words, "I am jealous," written across his face. A satisfied smile slowly rose on her face. Good. This was progress. Late at night, inside Jawa Palace, our girl was focused on writing, her posture dignified and elegant. But the quiet night was broken when the Emperor personally stepped inside. She asked why he had come, and he coldly asked in return, "Can I not come?" He gripped her chin, and the touch of his fingertips made her heart tremble. Before she could react, he bent down and kissed her. The brush in her hand fell onto the paper with a soft tap, spreading a dark blot of ink and leaving a messy stain on the perfect scripture scroll. At the same time, another concubine was being forcibly stopped outside the palace gates. And inside, the Emperor was speaking tender words in a low voice. He told our girl that she no longer needed to copy those annoying Buddhist scriptures, and that he would spare her this time. She nearly melted in his arms, sighing softly that His Majesty truly doted on her. He chuckled, a dangerous light flashing in his eyes, and said she was bold to dare guess his thoughts. He teasingly tugged at the ties on her clothing, and her face reddened as she admitted that after realizing he cared about her, she had gotten carried away for a moment. He only smiled, a trace of gentleness in his voice. "Be good," he said softly, admitting that he found this lively side of her refreshing, and promising that he would treat her well. Our girl was completely stunned. That cold, icy man, the Emperor, who had always been self-disciplined and restrained, actually said something like that. Her cheeks flushed bright red, and she said softly that she would be obedient. His gaze deepened in response, as if he had made a silent promise. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, rumors had long since begun to spread. The palace servants were all whispering that the Emperor had gone to Lady Shen's place. But their mistress, the formidable consort Yu, was having someone comb her hair. A palace maid found a white hair and asked whether she should hide it for her. Consort Yu is utterly ruthless. "No need," she said coldly. "Pluck it out." The next morning, Jawa Palace welcomed the morning light. Our heroine woke in the warm sunlight, stretched, and then let out a wail when she realized she had actually slept this late. She sat up and asked the palace maid where the Emperor had gone. The maid reported that His Majesty had gone to morning court and had not wanted to wake her. Our girl gave a huge yawn and complained that her whole body hurt. It seemed that serving the Emperor really was an extremely physically demanding task. She asked whether the special medicine had been applied. The palace maid hesitated and said the ointment had been delivered, but without her mistress's orders, she had not dared use it on her own. "I feel awful," our girl said. "Put it on me now." But just then, another palace maid hurried in, bringing the latest palace gossip. Apparently, Lady Fong had provoked a powerful enemy. The palace maid whispered that Consort Yu, who was pregnant and at the height of her power, had punished Lady Fong by making her kneel for a full 4 hours. A wicked little smile appeared at the corner of our girl's lips. Consort Yu is still very dedicated to playing the palace intrigue villain, she thought. Poor Lady Fong. In Lady Fong's palace, the atmosphere was so gloomy it seemed ready to thunder. A plate of ribs was brought before her, but she was not satisfied at all. She slammed down her chopsticks, furious beyond measure, feeling that the imperial kitchen had actually served her such ordinary food. The maid beside her tried to persuade her to calm down, reminding her that she should focus on safely giving birth to a prince. But Lady Fong had already been swallowed up by rage and swore that she would repay Consort Yu tenfold for this insult. Back in our girl's palace, a far more pleasant reward arrived. Palace servants brought new clothes, personally bestowed by the Empress. The palace maid explained that with summer approaching, Her Majesty the Empress had ordered new garments made for every palace. The box was opened, revealing a bolt of gorgeous, shimmering fabric inside. Our girl very properly thanked Her Majesty the Empress. The palace servants all praised the beautiful pattern, but our clever heroine knew this was not merely a reward. This was a gentle reminder from the Empress, who was growing very impatient waiting for a grandson. She realized it. The fact that she had not had any good news for so long had probably already made the Empress suspicious. She thought that this reward was the perfect opportunity. At the Dragon Boat Festival banquet, she would wear this outfit as a gesture of goodwill and continue pulling this powerful Empress over to her side. "Since we have nothing else to do anyway," she announced, "let's make something." The palace maid immediately became alert because she had never seen her mistress so much as hold a needle. But our heroine was full of completely unfounded confidence. If the original owner was a goddess of embroidery, then by rounding up, she was one too. Besides, she was preparing to invent modern, comfortable underwear for this ancient world. Her palace maids completely believed her, awed by her dignified and professional manner. They thought they were about to witness the creation of a masterpiece to be passed down through the ages. But what they got in the end, well, could only be called a thing. The palace maid tactfully commented on the disastrous embroidery, but our girl brushed it off directly, saying that her hands were just rusty and she needed to warm up. Really? The growing pile of ruined fabric beside her clearly told a completely different story. The palace maid suggested that perhaps they should stop wasting these extremely expensive materials. That night, a figure passed through the palace paths. It was the emperor heading straight for a bedchamber. Meanwhile, our little seamstress was still struggling desperately, convinced that after working at it all day, she ought to have made some progress. She proudly held up her work, a crooked, miserable-looking yellow duck. And of course, the emperor just had to walk in at that exact moment, perfectly catching her disaster-level handicraft scene. He merely stared at it, utterly silent, his face a perfect mask of confusion. She stiffened abruptly, realizing she had been caught red-handed, and cried out as she tried to hide the evidence behind her back. "What did you embroider?" he asked, his voice calm in a dangerous way. "Mandarin ducks," she lied without changing expression. Her palace maid behind her had completely broken down. That was clearly supposed to be a duck. Our girl tried to salvage the situation by asking whether he had eaten, but he clearly had no intention of letting her off. "This is for me?" he pressed. She could only admit that it was indeed for him, only her skill was lacking. She could sense that he was teasing her, so she tried to move past it, saying that something of hers was not worthy of his majesty. "I had intended to accept it to comfort you," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "but your craftsmanship is truly too poor. Accepting it would only encourage your mediocrity. Too cruel." In her heart, she labeled him as straight man of steel trash. But then he pulled her into his arms. "Since it was made for me, it should not be given to anyone else," he said. Her heart instantly melted, and she felt he was simply the gentlest man in the world, until he added another sentence. "Next time you embroider something, perhaps I really will be able to tell what it is." She was instantly mortified and hurriedly suggested that they have dinner first. While eating, she was enjoying the delicious dishes when she suddenly felt an itch on her leg. A mosquito. She began scratching non-stop, and when the palace maid saw it, her face turned pale with fright. The women of the palace were supposed to be flawless. They absolutely could not let the Empress see them behaving so improperly. The more she scratched, the worse it got, and the palace maid hurriedly grabbed her hand to stop her. The Emperor immediately noticed something was wrong. Our girl panicked, thinking he would surely be disgusted. But when he saw the large red, swollen area, his expression darkened. Summon the imperial physician, he ordered. She was completely stunned. It was just a mosquito bite. Was there any need for such a fuss? But the palace maid was beaming with joy. His Majesty really did dote on her. The imperial physician arrived and reported that it was not serious, only that her special constitution made the reaction more severe. He presented an ointment to reduce the swelling, but the emperor pressed further, asking how to prevent it from happening again. The imperial physician suggested wearing insect-repelling sachets. Do it, the emperor ordered. The palace maid brought the ointment over, but the ointment was pitch black. Our girl worried that he would find the black mark ugly, so she wanted to say she would apply it later, but he would not allow it at all. He gently held her face, his tone firm. Don't move. He took the ointment and personally applied it to the mosquito bite on her face. Her whole body stiffened, convinced that he must hate seeing her like this. Then, without saying a word, he left. She was utterly confused, with a black mark on her face, while he stood outside the door with a thoughtful expression. A moment later, he came back. She was very surprised, but he explained that he had only gone out to order the palace servants to light mugwort to repel insects. Then he looked at her and revealed a gentle smile. Now, attend me as I wash and go to bed. She happily agreed. Later, lying in bed, she could not help staring at him. This feeling of expecting nothing, simply lying beside him, was very new. What are you doing? He asked when he noticed her gaze. She merely smiled, but his mind began racing. Was she happy just because she could stay by his side, or was she worried that he would leave because of the ointment earlier? He turned toward her and softened his voice. Sleep properly. No mischief. He closed his eyes, but then felt a faint itch on his skin. He abruptly opened his eyes, just in time to see her using that black ointment to prank him by drawing a mustache and joined eyebrows on his face. She immediately pretended to be fast asleep, like an innocent little angel. But she could not fool anyone at all. The emperor, who had now been drawn to look like a cartoon villain, slowly opened one eye. So he had been awake the whole time. She was done for. In the quiet night of Zhaohua Palace, the emperor looked at our girl, sleeping soundly, and a rare moment of peace appeared on his face. But that peace did not last long. He turned and left. State affairs were calling him. He stopped outside her bedchamber and instructed his attendants not to wake her, his tone very soft. You may dress me instead. The old eunuch's heart was about to melt. He thought that his Majesty now doted on her to this extent. In the past, this had been treatment only the Empress received, and now even she was not allowed it. As they walked, the Emperor also ordered the imperial physician to prepare more insect-repelling sachets for every palace. The eunuch understood perfectly well that all of this was for Lady Shen. He sighed inwardly. She truly was blessed. But the peaceful morning was soon shattered when a guard announced the Empress Dowager's arrival. The Emperor was at his desk when his mother stormed in angrily, her face dark as thunder. He respectfully bowed and greeted her. But she got straight to the point. I have come today because consort you punished Lady Fong by making her kneel for several hours, she said, her voice carrying a chill. Does the emperor know of this? She pressed. He pretended not to know, saying that he had been busy with state affairs and had not heard of it. The Empress Dowager sneered. You had not heard, or you deliberately chose not to interfere? She said sharply, accusing consort you of growing increasingly lawless because she was pregnant. If this continued, perhaps she would not even place the Empress in her eyes. The emperor's face was as cold as a mask. He admitted that consort you was indeed somewhat arrogant and spoiled, and that he would reprimand her. But his mother was not finished. A reprimand is naturally necessary, but the root lies in the central palace, she said. Without children, she continued, her voice sharp, it is difficult for the Empress to command respect. The emperor understood what she meant. She finally glared at him coldly. You yourself should also fulfill your duty. Before leaving, she threw down another line. Today is the first day of the month, yet you did not even go to the Empress. Have you now even stopped taking my words seriously? The chief eunuch watched her leave and sighed that the Empress Dowager actually cared more about imperial heirs than her own son's happiness or anger. In the study, only the emperor remained, and his composure finally cracked. I have already ascended the throne according to her wishes, he thought. Does she still intend to keep interfering? His mother's obsession with bloodline succession made him feel as if he were nothing more than a tool. Was he truly her son, or merely a means to accomplish her goals? And for some reason, all her dissatisfaction always managed to circle back to consort you in the end. A chill flashed through his eyes. "Zhao Hai," he called. "This servant is here." In a voice so calm, it was frightening. The emperor delivered his verdict. "Pass down my decree. Have consort you remain in Zhongyu Palace to peacefully nurture her pregnancy. She is not to go out at will again." "Yes, your majesty." The eunuch lowered himself and accepted the order. He knew exactly what this meant. This was confinement. Consort you would surely be so angry she would smash teacups, then vent all her fury on Lady Fong. This grudge would likely become even more intense. Meanwhile, in Fengyi Hall, the Empress was calmly arranging dinner when her maid hurried in with a fresh piece of gossip. His Majesty ordered consort you to rest quietly and forbade her from taking even half a step out of her palace. The maid whispered excitedly. She was so angry she smashed a plate. A faint, satisfied smile appeared at the corner of the Empress's lips. "It is time she reined her temper," she said lightly. Just then, a guard announced the Emperor's arrival. The atmosphere at dinner was stiff enough to be uncomfortable. The Empress was flawlessly dignified, and the Emperor commented that even the serving of the dishes was strictly according to the rules. Yet anger was bottled up inside him because there was not a single dish I like. The Empress's maid watched the two of them, her stomach nodding. Every time His Majesty came, it was this restrained. How could their relationship possibly improve? Before long, the Emperor left. The Empress respectfully saw him off, and another night was completely wasted. Her maid finally spoke. "Your Majesty, perhaps if you spoke a few more words with His Majesty, matters in the bedchamber would go more smoothly." The Empress whipped around to look at her, as if deeply offended. "I am the Empress, not some consort who uses seduction to seek favor," she said sharply, her pride stung. "I cannot lower my own status like that. Do you understand?" The maid could only answer softly that she did. Outside the hall, the eunuch by the Emperor's side sighed. His Majesty had never once left Fengyi Hall with a smile. What exactly was the Empress thinking to value etiquette more than her own husband? The Emperor's face was dark as storm clouds, his eyes cold and distant. Then he suddenly ordered, "Change course. Go to Zhaohua Palace." The eunuch trembled. Going directly to Lady Shen's palace at this hour? His heart shook as he thought that although Lady Shen was favored, could she handle an enraged emperor? They arrived at the beautiful Zhaohua Palace beneath the moonlight. The eunuch could only pray silently in his heart. "Lady Shen, may you turn misfortune into fortune." The emperor stormed into the room with terrifying momentum surrounding him. The poor girl was sitting there, and the moment she saw him, her heart went cold. "Your Majesty has arrived," she stammered as she bowed, her mind spinning rapidly. "What happened? Did I do something wrong?" He only stared at her, his expression unreadable and frightening. Finally, he spoke, his voice pressed extremely low. "Lady Shen." She quickly confirmed that she had completely recovered. He only said briefly, "Good," but she could feel that his presence was even more oppressive, and his movements were heavier and rougher. She knew that the most urgent task was to soothe this time bomb that could explode at any moment. She played the perfect hostess and served him delicious honeybean cakes. He only stared at her. She hesitated for a moment. In an icy tone, he told her to speak if she had something to say, saying that such hesitation was unlike her. She took a deep breath and set her trap. She brought up the morning 2 days ago, when she had woken to find 2 little finger marks on her face. The emperor immediately recalled that night, when he had childishly drawn on her face while she slept. A wave of extreme embarrassment instantly swept over him. He did not understand what madness had possessed him back then to do something so foolish. He looked at her somewhat awkwardly and asked, "You?" She played dumb, saying that she had not expected it to be His Majesty's doing. And just like that, the emperor's enormous pride took over everything. He was unbelievably embarrassed inside. Yet he also felt that she had not brought this up because she was angry, but because she was happy. She must admire me very much. The eunuch beside them watched this scene and his jaw nearly dropped. Incredible. The emperor had actually been coaxed into a better mood. Later that night, the atmosphere in Zhaohua Palace changed. Since he had already been soothed, our girl realized that he instead seemed even more like a wolf. He drew her into his burning embrace and pressed her down. She called out his name. He gently held her wrist, his voice low and hoarse as he asked, "Does it hurt?" She said softly that it did not, though her mind was already in turmoil. This cold-hearted, ruthless tyrant actually cared whether she was comfortable. She moved closer to him and said softly, almost like she was acting spoiled, that she did not think it hurt. In fact, she told him, "Whatever your majesty does to me, I like it." The next morning, our girl fell into deep thought, a blush still lingering on her cheeks. She truly could not figure out Xin Yuan Ling, this emperor who was supposed to be scheming, brutal, and tyrannical, actually cared about her feelings. This was completely different from the man in the novel. She called in the palace, made Fang Yun to ask about the latest palace news. Fang Yun reported that after the Empress Dowager met with His Majesty first punished Consort Yu, then went to the Empress's palace. She also revealed that His Majesty had previously summoned an imperial physician because the crown prince was ill and His Majesty had been very displeased about it. Our heroine instantly connected everything. No wonder he'd been so tense last night. It turned out he was worried about his son's health, and then had been forced to deal with his mother, the Empress Dowager, afterward. And the Empress Dowager had always supported the Empress and her maternal clan. Now that the emperor had ascended the throne, he was unwilling to remain under his mother's control, so conflict naturally grew worse and worse. He had gone to the Empress's palace only out of filial duty, and that had instead worsened his mood. And our girl realized that amid all this chaos and irritation, her performance of deep affection and loyal obedience had completely won his favor. She could barely suppress the pride in her heart. Her goal was almost within reach. Just then, the palace maids reported that the Dragon Boat Festival banquet had already been prepared. It was a banquet the Empress had proposed holding. A sly smile appeared at the corner of her lips. She would put on the new outfit bestowed by the Empress. It was time to perform another act of loyalty. At the Dragon Boat Festival banquet, our girl tried to find a corner and keep a low profile. An announcement cut through the laughter and conversation in the hall. Lady Fong has arrived. Sure enough, the sharp-tongued Queen Consort Yu had already prepared her verbal attack. "Oh, isn't this Lady Fong?" she mocked, not afraid of being punished again. But Lady Fong immediately struck back, telling Consort Yu to mind her words. Meanwhile, our little cutie was tucked away in the corner eating watermelon, leisurely sitting in the front row to watch the show. A moment later, the stars of the night appeared. Everyone rose one after another and bowed deeply, respectfully welcoming His Majesty and the Empress. The Emperor told everyone to rise, his gaze already sweeping across the hall and taking everything in. "Thank you, Your Majesty," everyone said softly. But what our girl was thinking was that someone was going to get very full from watching drama tonight. She still did not know that after the consorts took their seats, the air was filled with silent hostility. Consort Yu smiled smugly, noticing that another consort was wearing the clothes she had bestowed, a classic display of power. But our heroine had fallen into her own crisis. She stared at the dishes on the table, her face full of disgust. Another banquet strictly in line with regulations, yet utterly tasteless. She sighed. However, she felt the cold dishes were still fairly fresh, barely edible. Our adorable little foodie instantly turned into a little cat girl, happily nibbling on the only thing on the table that was still somewhat acceptable. Across from her, the Emperor was watching her every move. He recalled that at the last banquet, she had eaten the exact same thing. He actually found this little picky eating habit of hers especially cute. This man had completely fallen for her. But just as he was lost in thought, a scream suddenly rang out in the hall. Everyone gasped and turned together to find the source of the sound. It was Lady Fong. She covered her mouth, her face pale, as if she felt terribly unwell. Our girl merely stared blankly at this sudden turn of events, completely unable to react. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," Lady Fong cried. "I do not know what is wrong with me either." Then she collapsed to the floor in an extremely dramatic fashion. The Emperor immediately ordered someone to summon the imperial physician. A flash of insight crossed our girl's mind. "Wait, pregnant?" Sure enough, the imperial physician confirmed it. "Reporting to Your Majesty and Her Majesty the Empress," he announced, "Lady Fong is with child. It has been over 1 month." Upon hearing this news, one could almost see Consort Yu's soul float out of her body. The Empress remained dignified as ever and merely said calmly that she should be rewarded. The Emperor looked rather pleased, and the other consorts also offered Lady Fong their congratulations one after another. Everyone was celebrating Lady Fong, but the exchanged looks between the Empress and consort, you were simply murderous. Our girl took all of this in and thought that the expressions of everyone in the hall were truly fascinating. As for her, she maintained the perfectly calm poise of a queen at the center of the storm. Later that night, after returning to her own palace, she was terribly thirsty. The palace maids whispered among themselves at the side. They thought their mistress was drinking tea to drown her sorrow because she had still not become pregnant. But our girl was actually secretly delighted. Alas, our poor mistress is truly too heartbroken, she said with a wicked little smile. Before she could order anyone to prepare a spicy late-night snack, her palace maids had completely misunderstood. "Mistress, please don't force yourself to smile through the pain," they cried as they hurried off to fetch her food. She was utterly baffled. Smile? These sweet, silly girls thought she was upset over the news of Lady Fong's pregnancy, but our heroine had already laid out the truth in her mind. First, she had no desire to die in childbirth. Second, this whole affair would keep the vicious consort you run ragged. She was practically overjoyed. I can have at least a year of peace and quiet. This really deserves a celebration. This was truly a masterclass in minding your own business and letting things go your way. She took a sip of tea with a sly smile, thinking still, I imagine someone won't be able to sleep from anger tonight. And she was 100% right. On the other side of the palace, consort, you had completely lost control. That wretch, she gritted out. How dare she act so pleased just because she got lucky? She even dared smile at me. With a cold laugh, she said it was still uncertain whether that child would even be born safely. But then she suddenly clutched her own stomach, her face twisting in pain. Her maid rushed to her side and asked if she was feeling unwell. Seeing her chance, consort you immediately launched in a full acting mode. I am unwell. Summon the imperial physician at once. The maid panicked and reminded her that pretending to be ill at a time like this would only create rumors. Consort you flew into a rage. The maid desperately explained that this performance would steal attention from the pregnant consort and embarrass the emperor, but consort you refused to listen. She flung off the maid's hand and shrieked, I want the imperial physician. If Lady Fong cannot keep His Majesty's heart, that is her own lack of ability. The terrified maid had no choice but to obey. The next day, our heroine was lounging leisurely when she received the full gossip report. Consort you had thrown a tantrum, summoned the imperial physician, and tried to attract the emperor's attention. In the end, the emperor ignored her completely and went straight back to his own palace. What a ruthless emperor. Our heroine merely smiled knowingly. As expected, she thought, a crying child gets milk, but if you cry too much, you become an annoying child. Too true. Just then, her maid brought even better news. The palace had sent them a huge bowl of ice. Our heroine practically flew over, absolutely delighted. She began fanning herself, but her ever-considerate maid immediately took over. Mistress, let this servant do it. If you fan yourself, you will only grow hotter. The maid was deeply moved by her mistress's kindness, while our heroine had only one thing in her mind, heat. Then she suddenly came to a realization. Now I understand. She looked down at her elaborate clothes. No wonder I am this hot. These palace robes are far too cumbersome. So what did she do? She simply took them off. The maid screamed in fright, but our heroine did not care at all. It's fine, she said with a playful smile. We're staying inside anyway. She was glowing with beauty and soon came up with another solution. Have the guards watch the doorway. The maid was completely enchanted and agreed again and again, thinking their mistress was truly stunningly beautiful. But they were not alone. The emperor happened to arrive and even heard that teasing, coquettish tone in her voice. He felt a little jealous, thinking, I thought she only spoke to me in that tone. So she speaks to her maids like that too. He was both irritated and impressed by her outrageous boldness. He decided to show himself and stepped inside. Then he froze. Her clothing was disheveled, yet she was shockingly beautiful, and she was looking straight at him. Her eyes widened at once, filled with pure, unconcealed panic. The emperor's earlier amusement vanished completely. His expression turned as cold as stone, and his voice was low and dangerous as he asked her, what sort of attire is this? He stared at her. Can you have even the slightest sense of propriety? Oh no, she had been caught. Well, our heroine was fanning herself and practically melting from the heat as she complained, "Is it really this hot?" In her heart, she was still wondering why the emperor had to choose today of all days to visit her. The maids had already descended into complete panic, urging her to put her clothes back on quickly, but our heroine did not care at all. She thought, "He has seen me wearing even less before. What's the big deal?" Calmly, she sat down beside the emperor, blinked, and said in a sweet voice, "Your Majesty, on such a hot day, why have you still come out?" She then casually mentioned that the last time she went out, the sun had burned her jade-smooth arms. The emperor's gaze immediately darkened with concern. He gently held her wrist, saw a tiny red mark, and at once ordered the imperial physician to prepare burn ointment for her. She hid a smug little smile and sweetly thanked him for his grace. As she thanked him, she thought, one moment he was scolding her, and the next he was this worried about her. Suddenly, he pulled her closer. The brush of his fingertips sent a shiver down her spine as he asked, "Have you lost weight?" Before she could react, he took her hand and in the next instant, abruptly pulled her into his arms. She softly cried out his imperial title, while he lowered his head to look at her, utterly captivated. He leaned closer and buried his face against the side of her neck. She could not help letting out a soft, trembling breath. But just as the atmosphere grew increasingly intimate, he suddenly blushed and drew back. "This little enchantress nearly tempted me beyond self-control," he thought, his face as red as a young boy's. He muttered in a low voice, "Indulging in desire in broad daylight is truly improper." Then he quickly stood up, said he still had state affairs to handle, but promised he would return tonight. As he left, our heroine watched his back, an understanding smile appearing on her lips. She almost could not believe that he had walked all the way through the palace in this terrible heat just to see her. Meanwhile, the eunuch beside the emperor was utterly confused. He came all this way, so why leave so quickly? He had thought the emperor's interest had already faded, but clearly it had not. The emperor, however, had fallen completely into thought. He felt she was delicate and charming, yet also gentle in temperament, simply fascinating. He thought, "She is rather worthy of my favor." Then he decided to reward her with a pair of red jade bracelets. But the eunuch quickly reminded him that red jade was reserved for the empress. The emperor's face darkened, but in the end, he reluctantly agreed to put the items in his storage for now, for the time being. The empress put on an attitude of deep concern and suggested that she move to a better place in the palace, so the emperor could visit her more often. But our heroine saw through the trap at once. She immediately knelt, tears brimming in her eyes, and began telling her tragic story, revealing a shocking secret. Someone had been tampering with her meals all along. She explained that ever since that series of incidents involving Consort U, she had been trying to keep a low profile. Weeping, she said that if she moved somewhere more conspicuous, she feared the next hampered meal would contain real poison. The empress sighed, seeming somewhat impatient, but she believed her to some extent. She said rivalry and jealousy over favor were always unavoidable, then agreed to postpone the move for now. After our heroine left, the empress's attendant asked whether they should investigate her claim, but the empress raised a hand to stop them. She knew Lady Shen would not fabricate such a thing out of thin air and decided to send some rewards over, so as to keep her on her side. The attendant nodded, understanding the political calculations involved. Back in her own palace, our heroine revealed a cold smile. She had known all along that the empress had only panicked because another consort was pregnant and wanted to use her as a pawn. But just as she relaxed, a palace servant reported that a new visitor had arrived. The visitor was noble Lady Lin, who came in asking for advice on how to become beautiful. Our heroine immediately grew suspicious. They clearly had no real friendship. Our heroine was courteous on the surface, but noble Lady Lin was furious inside, wondering how she could actually be overshadowed by this woman's beauty. But before these false pleasantries could continue, a resounding voice announced the emperor's arrival. Noble Lady Lin's eyes instantly lit up, and she secretly rejoiced. He really came. She was already prepared to completely seize the emperor's attention. But Lady Shen remained as calm as if nothing had happened, merely drinking her tea slowly. She reassured her maid, saying that such a petty trick would not succeed anyway. With a confident smile, she knew her man far too well. The maids looked at her in confusion, while she sneered inwardly. She actually wants to seduce him right in front of me. She thought, she is underestimating my abilities and the Emperor's discernment far too much. After all, if the Emperor could truly be stolen away so easily, she would not have needed to spend so much effort winning his heart. She blinked slyly, certain that the Emperor hated this sort of blatant, impatient tactic the most. So what did our utterly unguarded heroine do amid this turmoil? She simply lived her lovely life, reading, eating pastries, and lounging leisurely. That was until her maid rushed in with earth-shattering news. His Majesty had personally summoned her to serve him in bed tonight. Just as Lady Shen had predicted, the Emperor completely ignored that desperate newcomer. In fact, after that little episode, the Emperor avoided the harem for a full 15 days. When he walked into her bedchamber, our heroine's heart instantly softened. Half a month without seeing him, she thought, how has he become even more handsome? Her heart was practically doing flips, seeing her standing there in a daze. He gently cupped her face, a trace of concern in his voice. You have lost weight, he said in a low voice. Has the imperial kitchen been neglecting you? But in his heart, he was already completely intoxicated, feeling that she must have grown thin from missing him. This poor little darling. He admired her face, bare of powder, yet still beautiful enough to rival the most splendid peony, and inwardly blamed himself. To leave such a perfect, devoted woman alone for half a month was truly a waste of heaven's gifts. Our heroine blushed under his burning gaze and begged him not to stare at her anymore. He leaned closer, a playful smile on his lips. You are bold enough when breaking the rules, yet now you are shy, he teased. Before she could answer, he closed the last distance between them and kissed her deeply. Be good, he whispered against her lips. Surrender already. Stop resisting. After the intense reunion, our heroine softly said she was thirsty. Unexpectedly gentle, the Emperor said he would have someone bring her tea. Watching her sip it in small mouthfuls, he thought she was like a little cat. She thanked him and prepared to leave, but he had no intention of letting her go yet. Rest a while longer, he ordered softly. Our heroine looked up at him, utterly bewildered, yet still tried hard to appear calm. She praised him for being considerate, but in her heart she was anxious, thinking of noble Lady Lin, who wanted to see the Emperor every single day. She was glad the Emperor had stopped that matter. Otherwise, her own palace would have been watched closely. She sighed softly, playfully thinking that this was all the Emperor's fault for being too popular. When he heard her words, his eyes suddenly darkened. Then he lowered his voice and said, I will teach you. He pressed her down onto the bed, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. What means to be too popular? The next day, our poor heroine had been completely drained dry. That beast, Xin Yuanling, his strength was far too much. She was trying to recover her energy when her maid reported that someone from the imperial kitchen had arrived. Her interest was piqued, and she had the person brought in. After entering, the eunuch explained that the Emperor was very worried. He had noticed she had lost weight and had even threatened that if such a thing happened again, he would replace everyone in the imperial kitchen. The eunuch bowed and told her that from now on, she could personally choose all her meals. When he asked what she wanted for lunch, she suddenly perked up, wanting something sour and spicy. The eunuch noted down her request and promised it would be delivered at lunchtime. Being spoiled like this, our heroine decided to take a walk in the garden to whet her appetite. She headed toward the imperial garden. Her maid wiped the sweat from her forehead under the blazing sun while fussing over her endlessly. But this peaceful stroll was being watched by a group of people green with envy. In a nearby pavilion, one rival gnashed her teeth in anger, feeling that all the Emperor's favor had been stolen away. That person was none other than noble Lady Chow. She walked forward with a smile on her face, but not the slightest smile in her eyes. Greetings, noble Lady Chow, our heroine said politely with a curtsy. Noble Lady Chow immediately went straight for the sore spot. Lady Shen, she said sweetly, you clearly received His Majesty's favor before I did, so why are you still only a low-ranking lady even now? This sarcasm could not have been more obvious. Our heroine humbly used her low family background as an excuse. Noble Lady Chow sneered, thinking at least she knew her place. Then came the attempt to put her in her place. Noble Lady Chow lazily leaned back. I am thirsty, she announced. She looked straight at our heroine and ordered, Lady Shen, pour me a cup of tea. Our heroine was so shocked, she fell silent on the spot. But of course, another consort simply had to make matters worse. This noble Lady Chow was very displeased and immediately accused our heroine of pretending to be pitiful. Our poor heroine merely stood there, completely baffled by this sudden hostility. Noble Lady Chow sneered and raised her hand, preparing to slap her hard, but our heroine moved faster. She seized Noble Lady Chow's wrist in midair and forcibly stopped the blow. Noble Lady Chow was stunned by her audacity. Then our heroine presented a textbook-level performance. She pretended to cry out in surprise, "Ah," then immediately let go and fell backward dramatically. The teacup shattered, and she collapsed to the ground, looking exactly like a frail woman who had suffered endless grievances. Noble Lady Chow went mad with anger, screaming and calling her a wretched thing, telling her not to think she could deceive her. The maid hurried to our heroine's side and asked whether she was all right, but one look at our heroine's expression made everything clear. It was the cold gaze of a woman in complete control. Noble Lady Chow burned with rage, thinking that this woman of lower rank had actually dared touch her. She raised her hand again and shrieked, "You still dare glare at me?" But just as she was about to strike, an authoritative voice rang out. "Stop! Noble Lady Chow, what are you doing? Look who had arrived." The Empress was here, and she looked deeply displeased. She calmly walked over to the scene of the incident. In an icy tone, she said to Noble Lady Chow, "You speak first." Noble Lady Chow immediately began complaining, saying our heroine had provoked her, and that she had merely been teaching her a lesson. The Empress then turned to our heroine and asked her to describe what had happened. Our heroine perfectly played the victim, tearfully begging the Empress to uncover the truth and swearing she had never provoked anyone. The Empress was no fool. In her heart, she had already seen how arrogant Noble Lady Chow was, so she ordered the palace maids to be summoned as witnesses. The Empress gave a slight nod, as if sealing Noble Lady Chow's fate, while Noble Lady Chow visibly began to panic, sweat forming on her forehead. The palace maid knelt and explained the entire matter. Noble Lady Chow had flown into a rage and pushed our innocent heroine to the ground. The Empress turned to Noble Lady Chow and asked coldly, "What else do you have to say?" Noble Lady Chow desperately defended herself, stammering that our heroine was a seductive vixen and that it was all an act. She looked utterly flustered, but the Empress had heard enough. Contempt flashed in her eyes. "How insolent," she said coldly. "You are merely a noble lady. Why do you have to make another consort serve you tea?" Noble Lady Chow still tried to stammer out excuses, but it was too late. The Empress delivered her judgment. Noble Lady Chow's green name tablet was to be removed, and she was to return to her palace and reflect behind closed doors. As the guards dragged away the fallen Noble Lady Chow, she was still pleading for mercy. Our heroine thanked the Empress with perfect etiquette, victorious yet proper. The Empress comforted her, saying that with this punishment, no one would dare trouble her so casually again in the future. Our heroine looked deeply grateful, the very picture of loyalty and obedience. The Empress simply told her to go back and rest, her protection mission perfectly completed. Meanwhile, the Emperor was listening to a report. He lifted his head from the memorials, his expression serious. "I heard Lady Shen was injured in the Imperial Garden. What happened?" he demanded. The eunuch explained that Noble Lady Chow had struck our heroine, and the Empress had already dealt with it. The Emperor nodded, approving the Empress's decision, but then added a chilling order. "If Noble Lady Chow still shows no remorse, then from now on, there is no need to send her before me again." The eunuch was startled. The Emperor usually paid little attention to harem disputes, yet this time, because of this matter, he had completely cut off Noble Lady Chow's future. Thinking of his delicate beloved, the Emperor wondered how badly she had been hurt and asked the eunuch about her injuries. The eunuch said he had not gone to see yet, so the Emperor decisively rose. "Then I will go see her myself." The people beside him hurriedly tried to dissuade him, saying that palace was too far away. Only then did the Emperor reluctantly sit back down, but he still could not let it go. "Wait," he said, "go and see her in my place." Then he added, "and send some rewards to comfort her." A while later, the imperial eunuch arrived at our heroine's residence. He asked the maid beside her about the situation. The eunuch learned that she only had some bruises, but medicine had already been applied. He conveyed the emperor's concern, saying His Majesty was busy with state affairs and unable to come in person. Our heroine thought to herself, he really does favor me. Looking at the rewards sent by the emperor, she was touched by his thoughtfulness. Then the eunuch brought one last piece of good news. Noble Lady Chow had been forbidden from serving in bed until further decree. A sly smile appeared on our heroine's lips as she thanked the eunuch for telling her. After reminding her to rest and recover properly, the eunuch withdrew. Our heroine saw him off with a gentle smile. As soon as he left, she looked at the pastries he had brought, then immediately took her fan and plopped down onto the floor. Her happy injury recovery life now officially began. She thought, I have now officially declared myself injured. No one should come bother me. I can finally slack off. But her vacation was forcibly interrupted that very night because the emperor himself actually appeared in her room. She could hardly believe it. I'm already injured, and he still refuses to let me off. She thought in terror, cast him a dissatisfied look, and muttered under her breath, Beast. He was completely bewildered. I came out of kindness to see you. What is that look in your eyes? He reached out to touch her, but she cried out and dodged back, pretending he had touched her injury and dramatically shouting in pain. Then she looked at him with tearful eyes, accusing him of coming here just to bully her. The emperor was stunned. I am bullying you? I came out of kindness to see you, and you are unhappy? He leaned closer and said she was a heartless little thing, actually looking at him as if he were a lecher. Just like that, her entire expression changed instantly. She sweetly lifted her head to look at him and said she had not meant that at all. He demanded a real explanation, or else he would leave. She smiled shyly and admitted that she simply had not dared hope he would truly come to see her in person. She began a textbook-level manipulation. When this concubine entered the palace, she said softly, My mother once instructed me that I must never be jealous. She knew there were countless beauties in the palace, and that His Majesty's favor could not possibly belong to this concubine alone. The emperor became interested as he listened, and she continued, her voice trembling slightly. Ever since this concubine entered the palace, Your Majesty has always treated this concubine extremely well. Every time Your Majesty summons this concubine's heart is filled with joy. She confessed that she knew he did not belong to her. But every time His Majesty came, she could not help looking forward to the next time. So she said softly, I both long for Your Majesty to come and fear Your Majesty coming. She looked as if her own feelings had tormented her terribly. The emperor was completely enchanted. He thought, I knew this little temptress liked me, but I never imagined she liked me this much. A smile slowly rose on his face, as if he had suddenly understood something. But am I not the same? He thought. I have never been able to restrain myself from sinking into pleasures of the bedchamber. He looked at her with an entirely new understanding. So that is it, he thought. We are the same. Lady Shen still wanted to pretend to be reserved, telling him that His Majesty understood best, and whatever His Majesty said, she would do. But the emperor did not believe a single word. There was a faint smile on his lips that was not quite a smile. Were you not very bold just now? He teased her. She immediately denied it. I was not. She was utterly flustered, her eyes round and filled with panic. How was she supposed to smooth this over now? In the emperor's heart, he was already completely bewitched by her. Those sincere words of hers had soothed his mood, and he thought, now she is pretending to be this delicate and timid. How am I supposed to resist? He leaned even closer, his voice lowered. No, when you were kicking the shuttlecock earlier, in front of so many people, you still dare to whisper in my ear. He pulled her tightly into his arms and continued, You are picky with food in front of me. Her list of offenses was not over yet, and you are afraid of heat. Have I ever disliked you for it? He bent down, his face only inches from hers. Where did that courage go? But she had an explanation for everything. Those do not count. I have always been timid. As he toyed with her, he thought that her mother had probably known her temperament long ago, which was why she had not listened to her. If you cannot even do this much, how can you be an imperial concubine? He lightly scolded her. He sighed and finally relented. Forget it. I'm a grown man. I will not haggle over this with you. He let go of her, and she immediately took a step back. At the same time, in the imperial garden on the other side of the palace, the originally peaceful atmosphere was shattered. An angry scream pierced through the shadows of the trees. Sure enough, It was that eternally furious consort you again. Pregnant as she was practically steaming with rage. She was beside herself with anger, all because Lady Shen had seduced the Emperor into spending the night. Her personal palace maid explained anxiously that Her Highness was in an extremely foul mood and had insisted on coming out for a walk. Suddenly, Consort Yu clutched her stomach and cried out in pain. The palace maid panicked, but Consort Yu shoved her away. I am fine. She gnashed her teeth and cursed. That wretch has angered me too badly. That is why my stomach hurt for a moment. She pointed with a trembling finger at the pavilion beside them. I want to sit in that pavilion. Help me over. The palace maid nervously suggested summoning an imperial physician first, but Consort Yu sharply rebuked her. Do you think I do not know my own body? This pregnancy is already more than 4 months along. It is stable. As she muttered, she walked toward the pavilion steps. But as soon as she lifted her foot, she stepped on something small and round, an egg. Her foot slipped, and her body lurched forward. She tumbled down the steps. The palace maid screamed in terror, Your Highness. The scene instantly fell into chaos. She ordered the servants to quickly carry Consort Yu to the nearest palace hall. Inside, our poor heroine heard that heart-rending scream, and the color instantly drained from her face. Her heart sank as well. She had already done everything she could to avoid Consort Yu, because she knew that woman would definitely make trouble for her. She thought in fear, I never imagined that even after hiding so far away, I still could not escape. Just like that, the Emperor and the Empress also arrived at her door. Lady Shen hurried forward to pay her respects and explained that just now, she had only seen a group of people carry Consort Yu straight inside. The Empress's expression was terrifyingly dark. She immediately took control of the situation and sharply ordered, Where is Wen Qiu? Go find her. A servant knelt before the Emperor, and the Emperor asked in a deep voice what exactly had happened to Consort Yu. He and Lady Shen could only watch with solemn expressions as the tragedy inside the room unfolded bit by bit. The imperial physician came out, his face pale, and reported, after Consort Yu fell, she began bleeding. I have already done everything I can, but the results are minimal. He gave the heavy diagnosis. The fetus can be induced out to preserve the mother's life, but it is no longer possible to save both mother and child. Then he said something chilling, even glancing at Lady Shen. Pregnancy in the Deep Palace is dangerous at every turn. Fortunately, I have always had contraceptive measures in place. Those words sent a chill down Lady Shen's spine. She realized that from now on, she would have to be even more cautious. The Emperor watched with an unreadable expression. The wait was agonizing. As they stood outside the room, the Emperor's face was deathly pale. Suddenly, the Empress abruptly turned around, her finger pointing straight at Lady Shen, her voice filled with malice. It was you. Inside the room, the terrible news arrived. A palace maid said softly to the nearly unconscious Consort Yu, Your Highness, the child is gone. Consort Yu completely broke down. Screaming, she lunged up from the bed and rushed straight toward Lady Shen. Was it you? But the Empress blocked her, her voice carrying a lofty gentleness. I will consider that you have just lost your child and will not hold you accountable for the crime of great disrespect. Then she coldly reprimanded this mother who had just lost her child for slandering others. Consort Yu demanded to see the Emperor and cried, begging for the matter to be thoroughly investigated. The Empress dealt her the final heavy blow. His Majesty was deeply grieved when he learned that you fell and lost the child. He has already left. How is that possible? Consort Yu murmured, her entire world shattering. The Empress drove the knife even deeper, blaming the child's death on Consort Yu's own recklessness. Her punishment came swiftly and ruthlessly. From today onward, you will copy scriptures 1,000 times and go to the Buddhist hall every day to pray for him. She smiled, and the sight was utterly vicious. As his mother, you must also hope that he can be reborn into a good family in his next life. Then came the cruelest sentence of all. After all, dying at the hands of his own birth mother, he will not be at peace even in the underworld. Consort, you could no longer endure it. She screamed in fury. Empress! She was dragged away, struggling and screaming the entire way, cursing that they were all wretches. Later, her mind raced. The child had clearly been stable. How could one fall make her lose it? She suddenly sucked in a cold breath as a terrifying memory surfaced. When my foot slipped, I must have stepped on something. But everything was already too late. The Empress was already reviewing the whole affair with her trusted confidant. The palace maid confirmed that everything had been cleaned up. The thing they had planted was actually not very potent, and they had not expected Consort Yu to fall down on her own. As for that imperial physician, he had also been dealt with properly. The Empress curled her lips in satisfaction. That fall had made their plan absolutely foolproof. Not only had they gotten rid of the child, they had also made the Emperor loathe Consort Yu. It was truly killing two birds with one stone. But her schemes were far from over. She thought that the child's death had delighted her immensely. Her face was shrouded in icy anger. Consort Yu had come to investigate the truth behind her miscarriage, so someone would inevitably have to pay the price. On the other side, Lady Shen could hardly believe her eyes. What kinds of demons and monsters were these women of the harem? She thought. She miscarried during the day, and by night, she has already started scheming again. She began to panic. Consort Yu had always been famous for being mad, and now she had a perfectly justified reason to go mad. Would Lady Shen be dragged into this muddy mess too? She immediately ordered the servants to keep a close watch on Rear Splendor Palace and dispose of anything suspicious. But it was already too late. Consort Yu was already kneeling before the Emperor, an exquisite veil covering her face. With tears streaming down her face, she said that her miscarriage was absolutely not an accident and begged the Emperor to seek justice for their lost child. The Emperor did not seem very moved. He merely told her not to keep making baseless accusations, and considering that she had just lost her child, his tone was already as gentle as possible. But Consort Yu was nearly insane with hatred. Even if it had been an accident, she would never let the culprit go. Then she dropped a tremendous revelation. Aside from Lady Shen, her voice suddenly turned cold. There was also something wrong with my pregnancy-preserving medicine. The Emperor's eyes widened in shock. A palace maid came forward holding a tray of medicine jar lids and explained that Her Highness had always been cautious, so she had kept them all. The imperial physician reported the heavy result. There was a faint smell of Bambi yellow herb on the lids, and that herb was absolutely not part of her prescription. The Emperor's face darkened. Zhao Hai, investita. He gave the order. Just then, the Empress entered gracefully, looking deeply concerned. She comforted Consort Yu, who had lost her child, and promised that she and the Emperor would certainly seek justice for her. The investigation came extremely quickly. Zhao Hai returned to report that a young pharmacy apprentice who had access to the medicinal ingredients had been found dead in a well. Not only that, they had also found cursed talismans in his room. Those talismans explained everything with perfect convenience. The apprentice had believed Consort Yu caused his elder sister's death, so in order to take revenge, he poisoned the medicine and then threw himself into the well. Consort Yu completely lost control and shrieked, "I did not do it." However, the Emperor saw through this plot full of holes. A mere pharmacy apprentice could not have done this alone. Someone had been stirring the flames from behind. He announced that the matter would end here. The servants had been negligent in their duties, and all of them would be punished. Consort Yu still wanted to argue. "Your Majesty, this matter is clearly..." He sharply interrupted her. Clearly what? She was defeated. She lowered her head and could say no more. The Emperor told her to take proper care of her health, then turned and left coldly. The Empress followed him out, saying a few bland words of comfort to Consort Yu. But the moment she turned away, Consort Yu's eyes filled with venomous hatred. Wretch, she thought. As the Emperor walked farther away, he also understood that if the investigation continued, it would inevitably reach the Empress Dowager. For now, he could only set it aside. He thought of the Chun family's ruthlessness, but his thoughts drifted again to Lady Shen. Remembering her pale and frightened appearance, a surge of protectiveness rose in his heart. What should I send to soothe her? He thought. Very quickly, he made a decision and ordered a servant to go to the storehouse and find that sealed piece of red jadeite. The eunuch was startled. That piece of jadeite was for Lady Shen? At the same time, Lady Shen was trying to relax in her own garden. Her palace maids were discussing this case and scoffing at the official explanation that the pharmacy apprentice had taken revenge. They were all certain that the Empress had done it. They also said that Consort Yu was usually so domineering, yet now she was strangely obedient toward the Empress. One had to know that in the past, she had even once made the Empress's servants kneel. Suddenly, A voice interrupted their idle talk. His Majesty has arrived. The Emperor arrived and asked about her needlework, holding a small and delicate box in his hand. Lady Shen hurriedly hid her unbearably awful embroidery, which was a bird that looked suspicious no matter how one looked at it. "Was this a gift?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. He smiled and told her to open it. Inside the box was a pair of astonishingly beautiful jadeite bracelets. She froze. He had personally chosen them. A pair of bright red jadeite bracelets. But this color was one only the Empress could wear. Her mind fell into chaos. Seeing her uneasy expression, the Emperor asked, "What is it? You do not like them?" She stammered, "But this is true red." A smile appeared on his lips. He had known she understood the rules. He leaned close to her, his voice lowered. "I know you cannot wear them outside, but I permit you to wear them for me to see." An indescribable meaning filled the air. Only wear them for him to see. Her heart pounded fiercely in her chest. This was a dangerous and seductive game. The Emperor looked at her and thought, "This girl truly tempts me at every turn." He took her hand. "Try them." He gently slipped the cold jadeite over her wrist. "They really do look beautiful," he said softly. "I also think they look beautiful," she answered softly. He had already pulled her into his arms. She grew slightly flustered and reminded him that the jadeite was precious. But he did not care. "If they break, I have more." He bent down to kiss her, but she playfully stopped him. "Today, I read something in a book." She teased him. His interest was piqued. "What?" She only called out, "Your Majesty." The next instant, she actually used her own silk ribbon, along with the new bracelets, to bind his hands. He froze. He had been completely unprepared, and she giggled. She drew close to him, her fingertips sliding along his jaw, her eyes flashing with cunning light. Her inner monologue was a complete mess. What happened to the promise that he was not fond of beauty? This emperor is way too wild. Early the next morning, in Zhaohua Palace, when the emperor woke, he was still lying beside Lady Shen and holding her hand. He lowered his eyes to look at her, a gentle smile on his lips. He noticed the red marks on her slender ankle and said softly, "I was only playing around for a while, yet I actually left marks." Our sleepy heroine shifted and looked at him dazedly. "Your Majesty." He continued staring at her ankle as a strange thought took shape in his mind. "Later, I will have someone make you a gold chain to fasten around your ankle. It will surely look beautiful." She was too sleepy to think about those bizarre words at all and only mumbled, "As long as your Majesty likes it." But when he lowered his head to look at her and held her wrist again, her mind instantly cleared. Wait, what new trick does this lunatic want to play now? Did he not say he was not fond of beauty? After she realized the implication, a blush quietly crept up her neck. "Is your Majesty treating me as a bird in a cage?" He yanked the quilt over, a smile on his lips. "Are you angry already?" He moved closer to her, his voice as low as if he were bewitching her. "But you little thing were born like a temptress. You truly are very suited to being locked up." She was left speechless, thinking that he was probably awakening some strange new preference. He still pretended nothing was amiss, stroking her face. "I merely think a gold chain around your ankle would look very beautiful." She turned away, not believing him at all. "Yes, I believe you. I'm going back to sleep." But he was not finished. A dangerous light flashed in his eyes. "However, what you said just now does seem somewhat interesting." As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed her down. She tried to change the subject and reminded him that His Majesty still had to attend morning court. He smiled and leaned down, pressing closer. "Today is a rest day. There is no morning court." She braced her hands against his chest, her heartbeat pounding like a drum. "Your Majesty." This man was actually indulging in pleasure in broad daylight. Heavens, his principles were collapsing. He merely chuckled and said that she, this little thing, had led him astray. Inside, Lady Shen was furious. "How did this become my fault? You were clearly the one who started it." Later, the emperor left her palace with a satisfied smile on his face. He thought that he had actually begun to enjoy breaking rules like she did. How depraved. Then he immediately ordered the eunuch to go to the treasure office and make an extremely special chain, the kind to be worn on the ankle. I like one that jingles when she walks. The eunuch could only bow and accept the order, though he looked somewhat shocked. At the same time, another consort Shun watched from the shadows. Lady Shen was helped inside, and consort Shun took note in her heart. His Majesty never cared about these things in the past, but now he has been utterly bewitched by this vixen. After returning to Zhaohua Palace, a eunuch came with the emperor's special reward. Lady Shen accepted the gift box and thanked him. Her personal palace, made Chunhua was overjoyed. His Majesty thinks of you at every moment. He just sent bracelets, and now he is sending something else. But when the box was opened, inside was actually a pair of exquisite gold anklets. Chunhua thought they were exceptionally delicate, but Lady Shen was greatly horrified. This girl is far too naive. This emperor has clearly awakened some strange preference, and I will still have to wear these things later. Afterward, Lady Shen and Chunhua took a walk in the Imperial Garden. The person they encountered was none other than Consort Shen. Lady Shen immediately grew alert. Consort Shen rarely came here. Where's she hiding from? Consort Shen properly paid her respects, and Lady Shen merely said there was no need for so much ceremony. Consort Shen forced out a friendly smile, said it was only a chance encounter, and asked whether they could walk together. Lady Shen agreed, but inwardly, she was extremely vigilant. She thought, how strange. There is actually an imperial concubine who wants to get close to me? Consort Shen's attitude was polite, but not intimate. She must be plotting something. Consort Shen chatted about the weather and praised Lady Shen for being favored, but inside, she was already sour with jealousy. In the past, she had even mocked others, yet now, consort, you had forced her into such a corner. She could only hide. She looked at Lady Shen and thought that this woman was living quite comfortably. Consort Shen knew that if she kept avoiding matters and never fought, she would never have a day to rise. She suddenly used the hot weather as an excuse and said she was going back, but before leaving, she still gave Lady Shen a gaze full of calculation. After Consort Shen left, Lady Shen pondered this brief encounter. Consort Shen had invited her to take a walk, but after only a few steps, she had left. That expression on her face clearly meant she had figured something out. This harem was a battlefield. As long as there are people, there would never be any shortage of conflict. After returning to the palace, Chunhua rushed in with fresh and explosive news. That was right. It was about Consort Shen. It turned out that right after they finished their walk, Consort Shen had run into another imperial concubine. That concubine said sarcastically that was Consort Shen not feeling unwell and unable to copy scriptures. So why did her complexion look so rosy? Consort Shen trembled and insisted that she did not dare defy her. But that concubine was merciless. She looked down at Consort Shen with icy anger and ordered her to kneel in the courtyard and copy scriptures on the spot. Chunhua explained that after being punished, Consort Shen very coincidentally fainted. The Emperor and Empress were both alarmed, and the Emperor was furious. In the end, Consort Shen was personally comforted by the Empress, though Chunhua said that the female official by the Empress's side did not look very pleased. Chunhua smiled smugly, like a little villain. But Lady Shen merely smiled. She had already figured everything out. This was Consort Shen's method of escaping consort use entanglement. She was rather bold, but she had also offended Lady Shen and the Empress at the same time, and the Emperor might not necessarily be pleased either. She sat down and fell into thought. This Consort Shen was not clever. Then she gave a new order. Chunhua, go close the palace gates. From now on, unless it is dinner or His Majesty has arrived, the gates are not to be opened. The next day, the Emperor was already feeling low because of all these disturbances and came to Zhaohua Palace hoping to rest. But what greeted him was a tightly shut palace gate. What was going on? The entire palace was sealed up completely. He personally pushed open the palace gate, startling all the servants inside. He was holding back his anger. Was this little vixen doing something shameful? Was she guarding against him now? Our Lady Shen came out to receive him. Looking so innocent, she seemed about to faint. Your Majesty, you are here. He immediately questioned her. Locking the palace gates in broad daylight, Lady Shen, what are you sneaking around doing? He lowered his eyes and saw that her hands were bare. Not only was she guarding against him, she was not even wearing the things he had bestowed on her. She merely rested her hand on his arm, her expression calm. Goodness, here we go again. Our little cutie had completely overcomplicated the Emperor's emotions. She was convinced the Emperor thought she had deliberately shut him outside and inwardly grumbled that he was just like a child. The Emperor gave her a cold glance, and she immediately changed her words. This concubine absolutely had no such intention, Your Majesty. She tried to change the subject and brought up the rumors about consort you. She explained that her residence was close to the Imperial Garden, so she usually kept the palace gates closed for peace and quiet, never expecting him to come over. But he did not believe her at all. He went straight to the point and asked whether noble Lady Shen had come to see her. Then he lowered his voice and warned our Lady Shen that she was no good person, and that in the future she should not associate with her. Our heroine obediently agreed, saying she had never dared to get too close to anyone anyway. That actually piqued his interest. He leaned closer and asked why. Next, please listen to the Emperor's inner monologue. He was simply hopelessly obsessed. He felt she was a gift bestowed by heaven, beautiful in appearance and carrying a natural fragrance. Every time he saw her, she felt fresh and made him feel at ease, and he was always thinking about her. Meanwhile, what our Lady Shen was thinking was that this face of hers was far too good at attracting trouble. He suddenly pulled her into his arms, the possessive Shiba Inu inside him exploding, thinking that a face like hers was bound to provoke jealousy. Then he asked a very direct question. Has consort you ever punished you? She hurriedly denied it, but the expression on her face said otherwise. Inside, she had already completely collapsed, thinking that the shadow consort you left on her was too deep. She absolutely could not admit it. The Emperor did not understand at all, mistaking her silence for magnanimity. As expected of the woman I chose, he praised inwardly, feeling that she was protecting her opponent's reputation. His tone softened. He said her nature was lively, and she should not always stay cooped up in her room. He even permitted her to go out for walks in the future and promised that if anyone caused trouble for her, he would protect her. Then he gently held her hand, noticed that she was not wearing what he had bestowed, and asked, "What, you do not like the bracelet I gave you?" Our Lady Shen screamed wildly inside. Who would wear such a heavy gold bracelet all day long? Did he take her for some vulgar nouveau riche? But what she said aloud was much smoother. Is that not something to wear only when serving your majesty overnight? Oh, she actually said it, and she really said it out loud. The Emperor's thoughts immediately went astray. Little vixen, he thought, trying to seduce me again. Our poor heroine only wanted to phrase it properly, but this man's confidence had already soared into the sky. She was terribly flustered, completely unaware what he was talking about. He leaned even closer and whispered in her ear, just this once. In the future, you are not allowed to seduce me again. She was furious. He was clearly the one whose thoughts had gone crooked, yet he had the nerve to blame her. He bent down to kiss her, and she called his name softly. At the same time, in Fengyi Hall, the rumors had already spread. The Emperor had gone to Lady Shen's palace, and had not come out even now. One palace servant said, "His Majesty truly dotes on her." But the Empress was not pleased. She complained that Lady Shen had been favored for so long, yet still had no children, making her more anxious by the day. The palace servant then proposed an extremely vicious scheme targeting another pregnant concubine. Perhaps they could use the method of keeping the child and eliminating the mother. A cold, calculating malice flashed through the Empress's eyes. An ominous sign appeared on screen. Our Lady Shen bound in chains, left at the Empress's mercy. This villainous woman sneered as she realized that this step had to be taken slowly and cautiously. Back in the quiet of her own courtyard, our heroine suddenly wanted to eat lotus root, but this brief peace was quickly interrupted. The former palace maid Chunhua suddenly appeared and dropped to her knees at her feet. Chunhua showed her so-called scar-covered hands and tearfully begged to come back. She claimed she had suffered endless bullying in the laundry bureau and would serve her mistress with all her heart in the future. But all of this was an act. In her heart, she thought our Lady Shen was a soft-hearted fool who would be easy to manipulate. But our heroine was no fool. She knew Chunhua had a good relationship with the managing matron of the laundry bureau. The loyal palace maid quietly reminded her that this was nothing more than a pitiful act to win back her mistress's favor. Our Lady Shen said coldly that she already had 2 palace maids by her side and could not take anyone else. But then a sly smile appeared on her lips, and she said that in that case, this matter would be handed to her other palace maid, who was also called Chunhua, to handle. Our Lady Shen announced, "I will change you to a good place." The loyal palace maid brought over Aunt Yun, who was in charge of assigning personnel. As this scheming palace maid was taken away, she was still asking where she was going. Aunt Yun explained that since she had been bullied, they would transfer her elsewhere. Right now, the only vacancy was at the residence in the east of the city. The palace maid's face instantly lost all color. Was that not the place where the eunuchs were served? "I will not go." Aunt Yun revealed a cruel smile. Being able to serve the few old eunuchs left from the late emperor's reign is your good fortune. Wow, that is ruthless. Elsewhere, the emperor was paying respects to the Empress Dowager. The eunuch by his side knew this would surely turn into a disaster, and facts proved he had guessed correctly. The emperor lazily performed a salute, then rose without saying a word, immediately angering his mother. He tried to leave on the pretext of government affairs, but the Empress Dowager did not fall for it at all. What government affairs are so urgent that you do not even have time to say a word to your own mother? He sighed and asked what she wanted to say. In his heart, however, he was thinking, what trouble is she going to make this time? In a fit of anger, the Empress Dowager smashed her teacup on the floor. She accused him of neglecting the Empress because of consort you, saying he was deliberately embarrassing the Empress. The Emperor's expression instantly turned as cold as stone. He said bluntly, "The Empress is incompetent. I have not stripped her of her authority. That is already mercy." The Empress Dowager was furious, angrily scolding her son, the Emperor, for saying such outrageously unfilial words and shouting that she was feeling unwell. But the Emperor did not fall for this at all. He gave her a cold glance, directly exposed her performance, and ordered someone to summon an imperial physician. Full of irritation, he slammed his palm onto the table. The Empress Dowager clutched her chest and cried exaggeratedly, "How did I give birth to such an unfilial son as you?" But deep in our emperor's heart lay a lifetime of resentment. He thought, even if she is pretending, she should at least pretend to care a little. What she cared about was always only whether the Empress could give birth to a legitimate son. He bitterly remembered that his birthday was coming soon, yet she had never remembered it even once. His fists clenched, and painful memories surged up. In a heartbreaking memory, he was still a little boy, shivering in the snow and calling for Mother Empress. Yet she said to him coldly, "It is fine if you have a fever. Perhaps then your imperial father will be willing to come take a look." Back in the present, his expression was hard as stone. That is true, he thought mockingly. She has never treated me as her son, so how could she remember my birthday? Meanwhile, our Lady Shen was choosing clothes for the mid-autumn banquet, but her palace maid hurried in with a terrified expression. Lady Shen calmly asked what had happened. The palace maid immediately poured out the news, saying that when she went out for a walk, she saw the emperor take away the Empress's authority. In the memory, the Empress was presenting the banquet arrangements, and as the emperor looked at the scroll, anger gradually surged into his eyes. As he read the scroll, he suddenly flew into a rage, harshly condemning her. There is a severe drought now, and the common people are starving and freezing, yet the Empress is still thinking of lavish feasts. The other concubines knelt and begged him to calm his anger. He then followed up ruthlessly, "Since the Empress is working so hard, then the banquet will be handed to consort you and consort Shun to organize." The Empress was completely stunned. He then coldly pressed her, "Does the Empress have objections?" She gritted her teeth and said, "This concubine dares not." The palace maid guessed very accurately. The Empress had just happened to crash right into the line of fire between the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. Back in the present, after the palace maid finished speaking, she was glad she could bring the news to her mistress. As for our Lady Shen, she merely revealed that clever smile of hers. This news had come at exactly the right time. She decided she would wear her usual plain clothes to the banquet later. Afterward, at the banquet, two concubines discussed how consort you was now in charge, and her tail was practically raised to the sky. Lady Shen looked at them and noticed the venom in their eyes. She lowered her head and looked at the dishes before her, bored by these endlessly repetitive dishes. Suddenly, a wave of sadness surged into her heart. She remembered the mid-autumn festival days in her previous life when she had spent them with her parents. She wondered how they were now, her heart aching as she thought that they probably did not even celebrate mid-autumn anymore. At the other end of the hall, the emperor was watching her. His gaze was deep. Could she be ill? He thought. The eunuch noticed that the emperor was already extremely tired from the festival matters, so he asked whether his majesty wished to rest in the nearest palace hall. But the emperor's gaze was still fixed on Lady Shen. He told the eunuch, "She does not look very well. I will go see her first." The eunuch was shocked. His majesty was already this exhausted, yet the first thing he thought of was still her. He went straight to her palace. When he arrived at Zhaohua Palace, he found the palace maids in a panic. "What is going on?" he asked. A palace maid hurriedly reported that their mistress had fallen ill and developed a high fever. The emperor froze. Yes, the palace maid explained. After the banquet, her mistress was in low spirits and sat alone in the courtyard. After that, she began running a high fever. Without the slightest hesitation, the emperor threw his personal token to a guard and ordered him to summon the imperial physician on duty. He rushed to her bedside and reached out to feel her forehead, unable to understand it no matter what. She had always been healthy, lively, and active. He asked sternly, "Why has the imperial physician not arrived yet?" The imperial physician finally rushed over. After examining her, he reported that she had caught a chill, and if she took medicine according to the prescription, she should improve. The emperor pressed him on when she would wake. The imperial physician's answer was very ominous. "That will depend on Lady Shen herself." The emperor's face darkened, and the palace maids trembled in fear. The imperial physician explained that the true problem was not the high fever, but that she had been thinking too heavily and had sorrow pent up in her heart. The emperor was completely stunned. How could she suddenly be thinking so heavily? One palace maid gathered her courage and spoke, guessing that her mistress was missing her family far away. The emperor lowered his head and looked at our poor Lady Shen, finally realizing that she was all alone here. He gently stroked her cheek and thought that she still looked so young. She was only a 16-year-old child. He bent close and said softly, "Get well soon." After the medicine was brewed, he stopped the palace maid. "I will do it." As he spoke, he took the medicine bowl. Her palace servants could hardly believe their eyes, and he actually fed her the medicine himself, gently and carefully. He stayed by her side until midnight. He knew that if he stayed the entire night, she would become a target for the other jealous concubines, so he decided to leave. "Take good care of your mistress," he instructed the palace maids before leaving. She lay there, trapped in dreams brought on by her high fever. In the darkness of her consciousness, she kept falling. She heard a voice, and a memory surfaced. Her parents were crying on the Mid-Autumn Festival because their daughter was already gone. In her sleep, she murmured, "Dad, Mom." She suddenly opened her eyes, sat upright in an instant, and screamed, "Mom." The palace maids were terrified and hurriedly rushed to her side. The palace maids worried that the fever had muddled her mind. As if changing the subject, someone said, "Mistress, you have slept for a day and a night. You must be hungry." He immediately ordered someone to bring some plain porridge. A palace servant brought food over on a tray, and the emperor personally took the bowl from the servant's hands. Then wait, oh my goodness, he actually picked up the spoon himself. Our Lady Shen was utterly shocked. "Your Majesty?" she blurted in astonishment. He looked at her with a hint of provocation in his eyes. "What? This is my first time feeding someone. Do you dislike how I am doing it and refuse to eat?" She immediately changed her words. "How could this concubine?" She opened her mouth like a little bird, and he fed her porridge. After venting the grievances she had kept bottled up in her heart, she suddenly felt much better. She even felt that Xian Yuan Ling looked a lot more pleasing to the eye than before. He dismissed the palace servants so she could rest. But when he rose to leave, Our Lady Shen suddenly reached out and grabbed his sleeve. He lowered his head to look at her hand, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. In his heart, he thought, after this illness, she has become clingier than before, like a little kitten. He decided on the spot, after my birthday banquet in a few days, it will be the autumn hunt. You will go with me. She blinked. The autumn hunt? He explained that it was an old annual custom to pray for a good harvest and was not anything important. Although I cannot let you see your family immediately, he said gently, it would be good to take you out for a change of scenery. Our Lady Shen's mind instantly exploded with all kinds of possibilities. She had already begun imagining herself eating wild game to her heart's content, drinking freely, and maybe even personally going hunting. She was so immersed in her foodie daydream that she even forgot to respond. The Emperor's expression darkened slightly. You do not like it? He looked at her with a complicated expression, clearly scheming about something again. He suddenly leaned closer, his voice low. Our panicked Lady Shen finally woke from her dream and immediately forced out her brightest smile. Thank you, Your Majesty. This concubine likes it very much. The Emperor only sighed inwardly. My birthday has not even passed yet, and her heart has already flown to the hunting grounds. But she reacted very quickly. Of course this concubine is happy because I can stay by Your Majesty's side. Well saved. Far too smooth. The scene shifted to the Emperor's grand birthday banquet. The Emperor and Empress sat at the head seats elegant and noble, but also distant. Our Lady Shen sat among the concubines, watching as everyone put all their effort into their clothing, practically wishing to outshine one another. She also noticed the chill between the Empress and her son, so cold it could almost freeze someone to death. The Crown Prince was also present, and in the corner, noble Lady Lin and consort you were exchanging knife-like looks with their eyes. Tonight's drama was far too thick. Meanwhile, two other concubines were discussing our heroine. Today is His Majesty's birthday, yet Lady Shen is dressed so plainly, one of them mocked. It seems she does not take His Majesty seriously. The other continued, could noble Lady Lin be blind? His Majesty may not like extravagance right now. If one dresses too grandly, it might instead displease His Majesty. The two exchanged a glance, feeling that they were truly clever not to have dressed too excessively. And where was the Emperor looking? He was looking right at our Lady Shen. The way she picked at her food at the palace banquet somehow made him find it interesting. The Empress broke the silence. Regarding the autumn hunt, Your Majesty, whom do you intend to have accompany you? Thinking of the children and several concubines, he left the rest for the Empress to decide. In his heart, he thought, I cannot very well mention Lady Shen myself. I only hope the Empress is perceptive enough. The Empress praised him for being a thoughtful father, then suggested, why not also bring noble Lady Lin, Beauty Zhao, and Lady Li? The Emperor's face instantly turned cold. Noble Lady Lin need not go. He abruptly stood. I still have some government affairs to handle. I will leave first. The Empress stood frozen in place, watching him leave. Later, a palace servant wondered in confusion just how noble Lady Lin had angered His Majesty. In another courtyard, a palace maid happily told Lady Shen that her mistress was on the list for the autumn hunt and could leave the palace to improve her mood. Our Lady Shen immediately asked about her riding outfit and had already begun planning ahead. On the other side, noble Lady Lin was practically going mad with anger. Ever since she last barged into Lady Shen's palace and caused a scene, the Emperor had never come to see her again. She was furious that she had not been chosen to go to the autumn hunt, and she also knew whom to blame. It must be that wretch from the Shen family who slandered me before His Majesty and harmed me. She blocked our Lady Shen outside, her face twisted with rage, and said, tell me, was it because you spoke nonsense in front of His Majesty that I was not allowed to accompany him? Lady Shen looked at her with a pair of innocent wide eyes. What is noble Lady Lin talking about? She calmly explained, how could this concubine have such great ability that both His Majesty and Her Majesty the Empress would listen to me? Noble Lady Lin has misunderstood. Even better, another concubine was watching the entire confrontation and thinking that noble Lady Lin was about to become another consort you, glaring at people during the banquet and blocking them afterward. Our Lady Shen was not flustered at all. Noble Lady Lin said angrily, what are you so proud of? You're nothing but a lowly little lady. With your background, what right do you have to go to the autumn hunt? Her palace may try to stop her. Noble lady, you must not. Lady Shen smiled sweetly and delivered the final fatal blow. This matter was not decided by this concubine. If noble Lady Lin has objections, you may go ask Her Majesty the Empress. Noble Lady Lin's palace maid begged her to let it go. But noble Lady Lin shoved her away and shrieked, get lost. The palace maid continued begging her to take care of her health and find a way to give birth to an imperial prince for His Majesty. But noble Lady Lin had already completely lost her reason. I do not believe it, she said through gritted teeth, hatred burning in her eyes. I'm a dignified, noble lady. How could I fail to defeat a lowly lady from some minor household? A few days later, the selected concubines arrived at the hunting grounds. A eunuch came forward to welcome them and explained that this autumn hunt was for praying for blessings and should not be extravagant, so everyone would share one courtyard. The ladies politely thanked him for leading the way. Beauty Zhao and Lady Li had already begun sizing each other up, while also noticing that Lady Shen was dressed in a neat riding outfit that gave her a unique bearing. They could not help admiring her a little. Lady Li asked, Lady Shen, did you make these clothes yourself? Lady Shen answered that she had merely drawn the design. Beauty Zhao smiled and said, it is beautiful, yes, but we are not really here to hunt. We are here to serve His Majesty. But she suddenly had an idea. Chunhua, come out. The horse field is empty right now. Let us go riding. Her palace maid agreed excitedly. The scene cut to the royal hunting grounds. Beauty Zhao sat on horseback, looking rather heroic. Her palace maid praised her. "Mistress, you are so beautiful." Beauty Zhao breathed a sigh of relief, feeling that now that she had finally left the stifling palace, her whole being felt refreshed. Suddenly, a reddish-brown shadow sped past her. As fast as lightning, it startled Beauty Zhao, and even her horse slightly reared. The rider pulled the reins and stopped right in front of her. It was actually Prince Chung. Before Lady Shen could say anything, a male voice cut through the air. "Why have you stopped riding? Your horsemanship looks quite good to me." Prince Chung turned with effortless grace and bowed. "Lady Shen of the Shen clan greets your highness." A handsome young man with a smile on his lips walked toward her. "You are clever, recognizing that I am a prince." She immediately wanted to excuse herself and leave, so she bowed respectfully. "Your highness overpraises me. This concubine will take her leave first." The prince watched her go. Seeing how proper her bearing was, he thought she was exactly the sort of woman His Majesty would like. As she turned away, he caught his own reflection in her eyes, and a dangerous spark flashed between them. The palace maids beside her immediately crowded around and asked who that was. She waved a hand and said they would talk later, but before they could take even one step, another imperial concubine stopped them. The woman reminded her with barbs in her words that even if something had been hunted personally by His Majesty, she still had to eat it properly. Just then, a palace servant hurried over to find Lady Shen and reported urgently, "His Majesty is drunk and is looking for you, my lady. Please hurry over." Our heroine's mind spun rapidly. Was the Emperor drunk and about to make a scene? A mischievous thought crossed her mind. Oh my, how rare. When she arrived at the Emperor's sleeping tent, she was announced, then saw the Emperor lazily leaning there in a loose, sleeping robe, the garment practically covering nothing at all. He crooked a temptingly suggestive finger to beckon her over. Our heroine froze on the spot, thinking that after he got drunk, he seemed like an entirely different person. He pulled her onto his lap in one motion and asked in a low voice where she had gone today. She said she had gone horseback riding, and he asked carelessly, "Did you meet anyone?" She muttered inwardly, "He can't be jealous, can he?" She decided to test him, so she admitted, "This concubine also accidentally met a prince." His eyes narrowed instantly. He gripped her chin, his gaze turning cold, and pressed her on exactly which prince it had been. In his heart, he was already starting to lose control, thinking that even if she was innocent, what filthy thoughts was that man hiding? How bold of him! Jealousy churned inside him, and then he asked the ultimate question, "What does he compare to me?" But our heroine was a master of this game. She placed one slender finger against her lips, a playful glint in her eyes, leaned close to his ear, and said softly that actually she thought His Majesty was more handsome. Then she leaned even closer until their lips were almost touching. Then she kissed him, blocking all his later questions back down his throat. She drew back slightly and, panting, added, "And better at making this concubine happy." Bang! A perfect finish. She applauded herself inwardly, thinking he was far too easy to coax when he was drunk. He let out a low, satisfied hum, utterly bewitched by her. He leaned close to her and declared, "I want to kiss you." Then he pulled her into a passionate embrace. He began playing with her foot and asked in a low voice, "Do you like it?" The Emperor had fully entered flotation mode, his gaze burning. But our heroine was completely stunned. Her brain short-circuited on the spot from this sudden turn of events, and she could only stammer his name, utterly flustered. The next morning, the Emperor returned to his businesslike manner and asked the officials which prince had been lazy and negligent during the autumn hunt. The answer was Prince Chung. An official spoke up for him, saying that although he was unreliable, he had no ill intentions. The Emperor sneered, thinking only a ghost would believe that. So he ordered Prince Chung confined to his residence. The attendants were all shocked. Had His Majesty not always favored Prince Chung? But the Emperor's thoughts had already drifted elsewhere. He recalled the previous night and admitted that he had been drunk, jealous, and indeed somewhat rough. He worried whether she had been hurt, but also knew that summoning her back again would certainly cause gossip. So he went to court and left her in the tent. Meanwhile, in Lady Shen's tent, the palace maid Chunhua was bustling around her. "How does mistress feel?" she asked worriedly, because when our heroine was sent back, Her face had been deathly pale. Chunhua said she would go summon an imperial physician, but Lady Shen immediately called out, "Wait!" She grabbed Chunhua's arm and stopped her. Chunhua was puzzled. Does Mistress not want treatment? Our heroine explained that of course she wanted treatment, but if news that she was unwell spread, it would damage His Majesty's dignity. Chunhua took another route and went straight to beg the Empress. She pleaded with the Empress to send an imperial physician, explaining that Lady Shen was so badly injured she could not even get out of bed and that there had been blood. The Empress's expression was unreadable, but she granted the request. After Chunhua left, a palace servant beside the Empress said in a low voice that His Majesty had been far too harsh with Lady Shen. It was practically like treating her as a plaything. The Empress agreed as well. For His Majesty to be so heartless was rather pitiful. The palace servant then said that with injuries like these, it might affect her ability to conceive in the future. This stirred the Empress's thoughts, so she instructed that nourishing medicinal soups be sent to our heroine's residence over the next few days. The poor heroine could only lie in bed and listen as Chunhua recounted what had happened during the autumn hunt. The imperial physician instructed her to rest quietly as much as possible. She was furious inside, repeatedly recalling the emperor's actions. He had clearly used that prince as an excuse to vent his own desires. She silently swore that she had to find a way to stop him from treating her like a plaything again. At last, the autumn hunt ended, and the carriages began preparing to depart. They returned to the palace. As our heroine was helped into the carriage by her palace maids, she felt a gaze fall on her. The emperor watched her from afar, thinking that he had not been able to see her these past days and did not know how her body was. But when she saw him, she was not tender and affectionate. Oh no! She directly gave him the harshest, coldest look, then turned around cleanly and decisively, putting her back fully to him. He froze. Was she angry? But immediately afterward, a faint smile actually appeared on his lips. She was rather cute when she was angry. The attendants were utterly stunned. This was the first time any concubine had dared show the emperor a cold face, and His Majesty even seemed to enjoy it. After they returned to the palace, a palace servant was sent to invite Lady Shen to serve in bed that night, but he brought back shocking news. She refused. The official reason she gave was, this concubine is injured and cannot yet serve His Majesty. The old eunuch thought that she was clearly throwing a tantrum and risking His Majesty's favor. As for our heroine, she unleashed her full acting skills, pretending to be pale and weak, and even hinted that her old injury might have relapsed. The palace servant was left speechless. After the emperor heard the news, he asked, "Has her body still not recovered?" The eunuch pointed out that Lady Shen's green name tablet had already been hung up again, which meant she should be fine. He had even confirmed it with the imperial physicians. They had reported that she had already recovered. The emperor's expression darkened, and he gritted out, "Lady Shen." The old eunuch trembled in fear, thinking our heroine was done for. His Majesty was thinking of her, yet she dared reject His Majesty. He waited expectantly for the emperor to punish her, even looking somewhat gleeful. But the emperor merely sighed and said, "Withdraw." The old eunuch froze. He was letting her off just like that. Meanwhile, the emperor was thinking, could I really have gone too far that night and made her loathe me? The chief eunuch then reported that Chunhua had once informed the empress about Lady Shen bleeding. The emperor's guilt deepened. He instructed the imperial physicians to examine her again and send her some supplements as well, but to do it discreetly. The old eunuch was deeply shocked, but the confidant beside him only said that she was someone His Majesty had placed in his heart. And so the stalemate began. The emperor was essentially shut outside the door, trying hard to make amends, while our heroine firmly held her ground. "My health is poor. I will not see him." The chief eunuch could only shake his head, thinking that Lady Shen was relying on His Majesty's favor and had been spoiled into complete arrogance. Outside, rumors were spreading that our heroine had been cold-shouldering the emperor all along. A palace maid beside the empress reported that Lady Shen had twice refused His Majesty's summons, both times using illness as an excuse. The empress wanted to know what the emperor had said about this little act of defiance. The palace maid explained that there had been no movement at all from His Majesty's side. She guessed that His Majesty was probably giving our heroine the cold shoulder to teach her a lesson. As the Empress listened, her expression gradually turned icy, and she toyed with a purple bead in her hand. Her face twisted slightly in silent rage. Anger surged upward, and she suddenly clenched her fist, crushing the bead into powder. She thought that Lady Shen was nothing but a child who had tasted a little favor and immediately forgotten her place. A cold smile appeared on her lips. After suffering a little, she would naturally come back obediently. The palace maid beside her was somewhat nervous. If Lady Shen loses favor, will it affect your Majesty's plan? She then hurriedly added that they could still focus first on the noble lady's pregnancy, then see how things developed on Lady Shen's side. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Garden, the subject of all these rumors was leisurely feeding fish. Our heroine looked completely unaffected by the storm she had stirred up, but the palace maids behind her were almost frantic with anxiety. They whispered among themselves, saying she had refused the emperor despite knowing his Majesty's temper was like a mine that could explode at any moment. So how could she still be so calm? Our heroine merely smiled inwardly, thinking her palace maids were terribly adorable for worrying. She knew very clearly what she was doing. She thought, "It is not as if I refused him for no reason. He was at fault first. This cold treatment is a power struggle, one that will ensure he does not dare trample on her lightly in the future, and is also a test. If no one comes to punish her, it proves that her weight in his heart has already increased." But her peaceful moment was broken by a shrill voice. "So you were here. Well. It was actually the forever annoying noble Lady Lin here to cause trouble." Our heroine's palace maids trembled in fear, knowing that noble Lady Lin had deep resentment in her heart and had come a step on her while she was supposedly out of favor. Lady Shen turned her face, her expression as calm as if she were wearing a mask. Noble Lady Lin. Noble Lady Lin walked closer with a smug and vicious smile. "I heard Lady Shen is unwell and cannot serve His Majesty." She sneered. "Yet you have the leisure to come out for a walk. Is this not deceiving the emperor?" Our heroine thought, at least she is somewhat clever and knows to pin a serious crime on me. Lady Shen did not panic at all. She merely raised an eyebrow and asked in return, "Then why does your ladyship not report it to His Majesty?" The corner of noble Lady Lin's eye twitched in anger. She completely lost her composure and shrieked, "Wretch!" Immediately afterward, a crisp, resounding slap rang out. Our heroine froze, and a red mark quickly appeared on her cheek. A towering fury instantly ignited in her eyes. "But noble Lady Lin, you had chosen the wrong transmigrator to provoke." Our heroine seized her wrist in midair, then backhanded her with a ruthless slap. The sound echoed through the Imperial Garden, and noble Lady Lin was completely stunned by the blow. Our heroine trembled with anger, thinking, since coming to this world, what have I not experienced? But to be slapped in the face like this? Does she think I'm a stepping stone anyone can trample on? Noble Lady Lin screamed, "You dare hit me?" Lady Shen's voice was dangerously calm. "Why would I not dare?" Noble Lady Lin was momentarily speechless, then began cursing again. "Who do you think you are? You have snubbed His Majesty and lost favor long ago." Our heroine interrupted coldly. "Shut your mouth," she said. "Even if I have lost favor, it is not your place to humiliate me." Then she delivered the final blow. "Are you trying to overstep Her Majesty the Empress and punish me on His Majesty's behalf? Perhaps you should go to the Empress's palace and ask clearly." Noble Lady Lin instantly froze in fright. Lady Shen pressed her advantage. "Your coming here today was improper to begin with." Noble Lady Lin's palace maid quietly reminded her that offending the Empress was not a good thing. Noble Lady Lin's face flushed crimson with shame and anger. She stamped her foot and left, shrieking as she went, "Just you wait." Our palace maids hurriedly rushed to Lady Shen's side, one of them blaming herself and saying it was all her fault for failing to protect their mistress and letting her be injured. "Mistress's face is swollen. How dare she?" another cried. But Lady Shen merely waved a hand, treating it as a lesson learned. She thought it was ridiculous that she had once worried about a clown like noble Lady Lin. She lightly touched her stinging cheek, and a new resolve condensed in her eyes. "Mistress," the palace maid asked worriedly. Our heroine had already made her decision. "Go find Zhao Hai. Tell him I am ready to serve His Majesty." That night, a palace servant reported outside the emperor's sleeping hall that she had arrived. The eunuchs outside were all shocked, unable to believe the emperor had tolerated her previous actions and then summoned her over the moment she relented. They whispered among themselves that if she could still come out safe and sound this time, then she truly was no ordinary woman. Our heroine stepped into the magnificent sleeping hall, only to find it empty. Her palace maid gasped, "His Majesty is not here. This is clearly meant to leave Mistress out in the cold." But Lady Shen patiently sat on the couch and waited. A quarter of an hour passed. The Emperor watched her from the shadows, thinking she should soon be unable to endure it. Finally, he made his grand entrance. She bowed softly. "Your Majesty." He had deliberately made her wait, but she still looked at him with those eyes full of adoration, causing his heart to tremble despite himself. "Is your Majesty still angry with this concubine?" she asked innocently. He said coldly, "Since you know I am angry, you still dare speculate about me?" The little person in our heroine's heart only felt that this scene was like watching parents bicker. He moved closer to her, his expression taut. "This concubine would not dare," she said softly. Suddenly, he noticed the red mark on her face. "What happened to your face?" His voice abruptly turned sharp. She tried to hide it and said in a low voice, "It is nothing." But he refused to let it go. "Lady Shen." His tone was serious. She immediately knelt and honestly said that noble Lady Lin had come to make trouble for her. "This concubine hit noble Lady Lin," she admitted. He gently lifted her face, his voice softening. "She thought you had lost favor, so she rushed over to hurt you?" He sighed. "Let this matter pass. I will find a pretext to win your dignity back for you." She raised her head, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Your Majesty treats this concubine so well." He pulled her closer and said with a trace of grievance, "I treat you well, yet you kept refusing me." She explained that what he had done that day had hurt her heart, making her feel that she was nothing more than a plaything in the harem for amusement. "This concubine only wishes to serve your Majesty alone," she said tearfully, "not to be used for entertainment." His expression softened completely. "You are not." He looked in her eyes and said, "How could you be a plaything?" She softly called him by his honorific, as if overwhelmed by emotion. The next moment, he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the couch. "Tonight," he murmured against her skin, "I will serve you." And later, he truly did. After she fell asleep beside him, the Emperor's thoughts were still churning rapidly. He was the Emperor. It had always been others serving him. But this little enchantress had him firmly in her grasp, and he actually sincerely wanted to please her. This was rather humiliating, but it also made them more intimate. He only wanted to spoil her and cherish her. But immediately after, the suspicion of an emperor surged up again. If she dared play mind games with him this time, what would she do next time? Would she become scheming like the Empress, or spoiled and domineering like the other concubines? He lowered his head and looked at her peaceful sleeping face, his own expression gradually turning cold and hard. If one day she revealed her true colors, he silently swore in his heart, "I will cut her off with my own hands." He clenched the bedding, but this resolve wavered again. Just thinking about it irritated him. But could I really bear to do it? He rose from the couch and spoke to his attendant. The old eunuch muttered that his Majesty doted on her, but she did not seem to understand the rules very well. The Emperor fell into deep thought, unable to understand why. When they had clearly already reconciled, she still seemed so downcast. Then he gave an order that chilled the air. "Go tell Wang Di to remove Shun's green name tablet." From then on, this meant she could no longer be officially selected to serve in bed. The next day, the entire harem exploded over the news. A hostile concubine approached our heroine with a fake smile. "Everyone is waiting to see you become a joke. What exactly happened between you and His Majesty?" But our heroine was as calm as a painting. She merely shrugged lightly. Another concubine reminded her that this was no small matter. But Lady Shen simply handed her a slice of watermelon. Her palace maids were about to collapse, but our heroine herself really did nothing except eat and sleep, so leisurely that she was completely unaffected. She knew very well what was going on. She thought, "This is nothing more than His Majesty trying to frighten me and make me restrain myself." She sneered. In the end, was it not just a little tablet? Some concubines still had their green name tablets hanging. Yet had they not never been summoned? She knew this was not the first time he had been emotional and overthought things. Finally, she cursed inwardly with all her might. He is just an almost 30-year-old Sundara. All right, everyone, here we go again. In the hall of heavenly origin, the Emperor was quietly dining with his most trusted eunuch. But while our heroine was not in the frame and was enjoying a plate of crisp cucumber salad, the Emperor's thoughts had clearly drifted far away. He muttered to himself, asking whether she would be frightened because of the green name tablet matter. The eunuch was startled at first, then realized His Majesty was once again completely fixated on Lady Shen. The eunuch could barely hide his smile. It had only been one night, and His Majesty had already started missing her. The Emperor, the very embodiment of a tsundere, immediately ordered the imperial kitchen not to shortchange her meals. He knew how harsh the palace servants could be toward those who had lost favor. The eunuch acknowledged the order, but inwardly thought, "Goodness, he is even worried she will go hungry during meals. This man has truly fallen deep." The emperor then felt that the weather today was excellent, suitable for a stroll in the imperial garden. He even specifically instructed the people beside him to make sure no unrelated people ran into them. Yes, Your Majesty, we all know exactly whom you want to accidentally encounter." As a master of reading between the lines, the eunuch immediately went to make arrangements. Meanwhile, in Zhaohua Palace, our heroine had just woken from a wonderful afternoon nap. Her personal palace maid very inappropriately told her that His Majesty was currently in the imperial garden. A sly, calculating light immediately appeared in our heroine's eyes, and she announced, "Let's go." After all, it would be far too much of a pity not to have a tiny little chance encounter. On the other side, in the lush imperial garden, the emperor was fiddling with the flowers and plants, anxiously looking around. The eunuchs beside him were nearly frantic, thinking, "You are clearly waiting for Lady Shen, so why must you act so awkward about it?" The emperor also began to worry, thinking he should have simply had her palace maid bring her over from the start. Just as he was about to lose hope, a figure appeared. Lady Shen had arrived. She approached with elegant poise, wearing a bright, radiant smile as she called, "Your Majesty." The emperor turned his face away, his expression cold and indifferent, but we all know his heart had already done a flip. She curtsied with perfect propriety and said softly, "What a coincidence." She even blinked lightly. The emperor's heart was practically melting. He thought she was more beautiful than all the flowers around them. Then she boldly asked whether she might accompany His Majesty on a walk. But this chaotic man immediately refused her, saying he still had memorials to review later. The air grew so awkward it almost froze. Lady Shen pouted, but the tiny chibi version of herself inside her heart was already cursing him for putting on airs. The emperor was fuming inside too, thinking, "I said later, not right this very moment." Suddenly, his gaze locked onto her, and he called her name sharply, "Shunqing." He looked at her with a burning, intense stare. She looked back at him, her face innocent and clear. He bent down close to her, his voice as cold as ice. "Who allowed you to come here? I withdrew your green name tablet, and yet you have already run all the way here to show yourself off." She trembled and called to him in a low voice, "Your Majesty." But he did not fall for it all. He flung away the hand she had used to clutch his sleeve. The force was too great. She cried out in surprise and staggered backward, completely losing her balance. Her whole body fell backward. While telling himself he had to remain calm, the emperor ordered her confined to her quarters, forbidding her to go out without his permission. Lady Shen only stared blankly and said, "Oh," then turned and left. The emperor was completely dumbfounded, his mind seeming to short-circuit as he could not help shouting, "Where is my beloved consort?" He watched her departing figure, his face full of confusion. She had actually left. His eunuch finally could not hold back anymore, and directly spoke the painful truth. "If your Majesty wanted to neglect her, why come here specially to see her? Wasn't this just making things difficult for yourself?" Elsewhere, another consort who had witnessed this whole chaotic scene was laughing happily. The emperor, embarrassed and furious, covered his face outright, thinking that he had only just managed to recover a bit of dignity. Then he ordered the palace servants to seal off Zhaohua Palace. The eunuch accepted the order, but he knew perfectly well that this was not to punish her at all. It was to protect her, to keep those ill-intentioned people in the palace from scheming against her again. What a man. Later, the emperor returned to the imperial study and was handling state affairs when a palace servant came in to report that the empress requested an audience. He sighed and permitted her to enter. As soon as the empress entered, she had already sensed his displeasure, yet she insisted on courting trouble. She brought up Lady Shen's bold actions in the imperial garden and said she was willing to teach her a lesson on His Majesty's Majesty's behalf. But the Emperor interrupted her coldly. I have already punished her. The Empress was greatly shocked and could hardly believe it. He had clearly withdrawn her green name tablet, yet now he was protecting her again. The Empress said that she had acted on her own without permission, but the Emperor's patience had already run out. He ordered, "Do not mention her again. You may withdraw." This dismissal was utterly merciless. The Empress secretly gritted her teeth, thinking, could it be that he now despises both of them? As she turned and left, a dark thought flashed through her mind. My little chess piece. Ah, the game has already begun.